love that intro. Welcome, everybody. I am Jimmy Snow, and this is HOSTility, the show where I sort of just show off friends, people I like, people I want you to know, people I want you to meet. That's sort of the whole thing. Is it an exercise in ego? What is it? I don't know. But today joining me is my good friend Bryce Blankenagel of the Glass Box podcast. And what else are you up to these days? Why don't you tell people for a moment who you are before we destroy the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as we will have done by the end of this stream.
Are we doing? Is that the plan tonight?
We're taking it out.
You go bust out the pitchforks from the basement, but yeah, absolutely. Meet me in Salt Lake City. Let's do it. Yeah. So my name is Bryce Blankenagel. I do Mormon related stuff. My primary show is Naked Mormonism. It's a serialized history of Joseph Smith and early church. Podcast is currently on hiatus while I put all that research into book format. And then my current events show that I do with Shannon Grover is the Glass Box podcast. We do deep dives into little tiny aspects and topical details of Mormon history, as well as headlines in and out of the church. So that's kind of my main projects right now.
So as a lot of people here know, first of all, I've changed labels. Up until recently, I would have said I am a former member or an ex-Mormon of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, that was sort of meant to be almost a colloquial, like, you know, I'm out, and eventually they're going to come around and be like, hey, man, you're excommunicated. But they haven't done it. I have openly...
Cowards.
I know. I have openly and publicly criticized the church, which is one of the number one ways you get excommunicated. I have lived in quote unquote sin according to their standards. I have, I've done a lot, and then here's the big one. I've laid with men. I am publicly queer, and that's there's something strange about how much I've done and still can't catch an excommunication. And so I've thought about this a lot. And the conclusion I've come to is that they would actually like me, Jimmy Snow, openly critical queer, atheist, humanist, skeptic. They would like me to start representing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. By the way, whatever the opposite of full is, so it would be empty. I am an empty tithe payer, 0%. I do not pay ever. I have never been asked to stop taking the sacrament. Granted, I haven't been taking the sacrament, but I've also not been asked not to. And they have not withdrawn my ability to be a priesthood holder. In fact, according to their whole thing, boy, Bryce, would it be a fun element of sacrilege? We could do it now. We could do it later. Technically, I am fully qualified to bless and administer the sacrament to their qualifications.
Right.
I could take the sacrament right now and be rebaptized once again, because that's what the sacrament is, right? It's a miniature rebaptism. Yeah, right. I could do that right now, and there would be nothing. Certainly, boy, I wonder, would that finally be the thing where they were like, all right, look, here comes the excommunication.
That's always the sticking point, is if people are doing everything that you're doing and they are actively engaging as a member, like by going to church. I think all you would have to do is start going to church, and then the local bishop would be like, who is this Jimmy person? I'm gonna look him up and see what's going on, and then might see your online presence and then call you in for a meeting. But like, until you use your membership for the church, they're happy to let you just remain in the limbo of not, of pre-excommunicated.
Though for the record, I do know, I for sure confirmed that I have lived in multiple ward areas who were aware of who I was and what I was doing, and that I was present, and no intervention, no. And
did you ever at any point try to be an active Mormon? Did you ever try going to church? Yeah, that's it. That's the sticking point. So if you do that and you're really, really wanting your excommunication, that's the way to go about it.
So one of the things they do is for people who can't attend the church, they bring the sacrament to you. So wouldn't I still be a participating member if on Sundays, should I start adding as part of the Sunday show, blessing and administering the sacrament to myself?
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yes.
We have to get. Go ahead.
You need somebody else who is also an Aaronic priesthood holder, because it can't be the same priesthood holder who is blessing the bread and the water. So you have to have somebody else who's blessing the water. Or, you can only bless one of them for the ordinance too, like to work.
I know that's preferable. However, it's not a hard rule where it's like you physically, like you shot your priesthood load and now your blessing won't work, because when we administered,
that's probably more just a customary thing. Yeah, you're probably right.
When we administered to the sick, most of the time I did both blessings, and I'm talking about going with bishops, going with higher authorities, fucking high priests and stuff like. So most of the time it was like, I brought this priest along and he's going to prepare it and bless it for you and blah, 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 blah. Most of the time.
So that could just be an idiosyncrasy of my experience, because when I was doing a home teaching, that was, before it was called ministering, it was always with my dad. He and then we would trade off which sacrament prayer we said. So that could have just been something that my dad imposed on our home teaching, and I just took as a rule. I actually don't know. Memory is a fickle thing.
It's almost definitely one of those things where people, because you witness them using two different priests during and by the way, that's just to increase the number of participating people. It's to increase the number of people who are doing something and there's some social expectation for them to be there, and they're participating in a ritual and they're casting their spells that week to feel like they've got magic powers. Like that's what that is. And so, I think, don't get me wrong. If we got to do it, I'm sure we can find a second ex-Mormon. But here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to mention, because I should plug this from time to time. We have a lot of plans for the line. And if the line continues to grow in the way that it's growing, one of those plans is a facility from which we can do certain live productions, and be able to have some community area and some production area in it. And things are currently pacing well that we will likely be able to do that. However, we'd love to do it sooner, and I think it would be tremendous if they still haven't excommunicated me. Again, never notified me that my priesthood's been withdrawn. They know what I'm up to. So they haven't even said, don't take the sacrament, don't claim to have priesthood, don't do priesthood rituals. I think it would be tremendous fun to start having live shows, maybe on Sundays in a facility with an audience, that we begin by administering the Mormon sacrament, because I can do it. This would be
fan. I love it.
Incredible, with full priesthood authority and keys. Now do you know what? I think you should go full tilt on this. Put on the baker's cap and the green apron. Have many of the participants only dressed in garments. Really do this upright. Invoke some of the temple language and rituals. Have people chanting and oh God, hear the words of my mouth. And I think you could really dress this up proper. We definitely have to dedicate the new, if we get there. So patreon.com/calltheline if people want to support to that end. But do it. If we do get there, what was I going to say? If we do get there, we definitely got to dedicate the building. We got to do some Hosanna shouts.
Oh yes, Hosanna shouts with the Hosanna. The handkerchief. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, and it has to be a black handkerchief instead of a white one.
Yeah.
Just shove it in their face.
We could do an anti-Hosanna shout.
And you know what? This might be treading into some controversy, but I would love to be there at the inauguration and administer the sacrament per se.
Oh, yeah.
And truly invoke the spirit of Joseph Smith. Yeah, I'm still on the rolls.
Okay, I thought you had resigned. You're right. Yeah, perfect then. Perfect.
Absolutely.
And they've never withdrawn sacrament or priesthood from you?
No.
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah.
I stopped going when I was 16 years old, and I haven't received any communications. I mean, I've even been part of protests marching on the church office building, and I haven't been called. Right? Like I said, the crux is you have to be using your membership somehow. So, and there's also another way to look at this too. Like the church is abandoning the term Mormon, and I personally don't use the term ex-Mormon or former Mormon myself. I use cultural Mormon. And hey, if they're abandoning the word, then I say, then that opens up the word Mormon to be whatever the fuck we want it to be, right? Like embrace that fucking
It's term. Ours now. Yeah.
That's right.
I did it years ago when they first started saying the like, that they're not gonna, they don't want that term anymore. I made a video saying like, okay, then I'll take it. And I defined Mormon is now a person who enjoys Sprite and sherbet together, or ginger ale and sherbet, whichever one you want. Mormon punch, basically. Let me say this before we keep jumping into the conversation. We do have lines open, 720-619-2288. Today, what you have is a person who has such an encyclopedic knowledge of Mormon history, of things that, in fact, we're going to talk about some of those things here in a minute. But basically, here are the callers I'd love to see. If a person wants to call in because they are a Mormon, then
please do.
I'm down to take the challenge. If you want to call us out, you want to whatever, call us to repentance. As long as you're willing to engage the conversation after, call in. If a person is curious about the church, if a person is curious about some element, hey, I heard this about Mormonism, and you'd like to know, because the funny thing is there are things out there that I've done full like circles on, where it's like, you know, you hear something in the church and you're like, no, the church, when you're still in the church, you're like, no, the church doesn't believe that. Then you leave the church and you're like, no. Like, look, that was still a misconception. Just so you all know, the rocks in the hat was still a misconception. We were told you're, and then couple years go by and you find out and you're like, so it turns out I was wrong. The rocks in the hat, that was a real thing. So people have general questions where they're like, is it true? Well, hey God, what's going on here? Is it true that blah, blah, blah? To the person who asked what the ultimate goal is to get me excommunicated or just make fun of Mormon sacrament. No wrong answers here. You are looking at two people who are victims of the abuse of that, you know, not to now say, please victimize me or whatever, but we are victims of tremendous abuse at the hands of that religion. It is an abusive religion. And I will 1000% take claim of, I will mock it to the extent, and I'm not saying this person was opposed to that. I don't know. But there is that I will 1000% to the full extent. I will mock it when I'm not actively trying to fight for whatever. Just cause I wanna.
Oh yeah.
Just cause it's enjoyable for me.
Possible to punch down at the church.
Correct.
Right? It is above everybody, so you are always punching up when you're punching at the church. Always. Now that's an important point to make here. That like Mormons, people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, those are my friends and my family, right? Like, I do not punch at Mormons. I punch at Mormonism and the leadership of this abusive cult, right? So I want a very harsh and stark distinction here, that I don't take aim at Mormons. I try to educate everybody equally, regardless of their belief structure.
Yeah.
My focus and my attention and what I am an activist against is an abusive cult that is the wealthiest religion in the world and the most politically connected and politically powerful religion in America. So
I will say there are going to be, yeah, and there are some things where I'm like, for sure, anything that is person directed, that often becomes bigotry, and so you have to be careful of that. However, I will say I'm not particularly concerned about if all I was doing was making Mormons pearl clutch over me eating some sort of satanic sacrament. I don't give a fuck. Fuck them. It's one of those things where it's like the bully on the playground. I acknowledge the bully on the playground is a victim of bullying himself. Usually it's like at home or there's some other thing that's providing that, but they don't get away with being the bully, I guess is the.
But that's why satire or lampooning needs to be done delicately. What you're actually taking aim at is the practices and the belief structure. You're not aiming at Mormons practicing those things. You are saying that the beliefs, the sacrament practices, the temple rituals are absurd, and let me lampoon these to show you how absurd they are. Yeah. So it's a very important distinction of like, you're attacking a thing, you're attacking a belief structure. You're not attacking the people who adhere to it.
Yeah, not at large. Yeah, not at large. Individuals. I'm gonna say some things about Russie Nelson is all I'm saying. Russie Nels, again, can't punch down.
He deserves it.
You can't punch down at Rusty Nels. He is the director of the single richest entity on the planet, but religion on the planet. And that's what's wild. So this is one of the things that we've talked about a little bit in the past, and it's just to sort of establish people. For a church with 18 million members, let's say half of them actually participate, the amount of money that they have managed to accrue is absurd, to the point that as far as actual money on hand goes, in a lot of ways they've surpassed even the Catholic Church. Now one can argue about the Catholic Church's political influence, the fact that they sort of have a country, have a state, have a to themselves, and obviously that those things might not be comparable. But as far as money,
the
monetary
reach is more
value,
vast with Catholicism.
But monetary value, for example, we just found out they were hiding $32 billion from the government, and that was just sort of one of their sets of holdings. One
little tiny piece.
Right. Yeah. Right. That they were hiding so that they wouldn't have to pay certain, and then they only got fined $4 million for it out of $32 billion. It'd be like getting pulled over for speeding and having to pay them like a nickel in your, not even like a penny that's in your cup holder.
Right. What I absolutely love about the schadenfreude of all of this is that the phrase "more money than God" now has an actual dollar number assigned to it. Yeah. Because they literally have the more money than any entity, than any person could ever use. They have more money than most countries on the planet, right? Like that's fucking insane that a single religious entity has more money than like the GDP of over 100 countries. That's not acceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable behavior.
And it also is established how institutionally, from the ground up, they are a religion which their worship includes a worship of capitalism. It is, they have now said in defense of multiple discoveries of these funds, because this $32 billion fund, correct me if I'm wrong, is separate from the $100 billion fund we found out about a couple years ago that is their rainy day fund, which they've, in defending these funds, have said this money will be necessary during the millennium, when Jesus comes back. We're going to need money to build. Well, you can take it from there, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, so the 32 billion revelation recently was under the umbrella of the revelation from a few years ago that was the dollar number attached to it was $124 billion. And that at the time was more money than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, any person, any living human. And the rocketing of the stock market that exacerbated the wealth growth of all of these individuals that made Elon Musk the richest man for a minute. And then, that same growth trend, the church also experienced that. And that revelation of $124 billion was before the COVID relief programs that exploded the value of the stock market. So that $124 billion is an obsolete number at this point, and we have no way of knowing how obsolete it is. We just know that it was before what we have seen in just the past 2 years. And the $32 billion was just one little tiny pocket within that larger umbrella fund.
So have you ever seen anybody try to estimate what the value is? Is there a number you think out there that is it an at least this, but it's probably further, or what do you think?
The only person who I think this is actually really interesting. The person who probably until he died last year, the person who knew the most about Mormon finances at the time was a historian named D. Michael Quinn. And that is because he had published his third book of the Mormon Hierarchy series. It's called Wealth and Corporate Power. And he went through the history of the corporate politic of the church. And at the time when he published that, it's essentially understood that he was the single living person who knew the most about Mormon finances more than anybody else living at the time. And that includes the people who are currently employed by Ensign Peak Advisors and the church to be the fund managers. Because he used such deep scholarship to go through the history of how these funds were built, starting with with the beginnings of the church, starting with the business ventures of Joseph Smith. Now, D. Michael Quinn gave an interview for the Salt Lake Tribune, and I believe this was immediately after the revelation for the $124 billion came out, and that was at the end of 2019. And I can only try and paraphrase it from memory, so I'll leave it to you listeners to look D. Michael Quinn, Salt Lake Tribune, I think it was a Mormon Land interview, and he threw out something that was very interesting, because the estimation at the time was that the church was pulling in $7 billion in tithing. And his response to that question being put to him said, that's just one view of it. And paraphrasing further, he said that the money that is estimated at the $7 billion a year income is only one facet of it, and that it's far more likely with all of their business income that they're raking in closer, I think he said, between $20 and $30 billion per year.
And what year is that again?
And I think this interview was given in 2020, okay. Possibly 2019. But yeah, so look up D. Michael Quinn interview church finances, LDS finances, and you'll be able to find the quote that I'm just trying to remember paraphrasing here. But essentially, he said that the numbers that have been revealed to us are so incomplete that they're almost wrong. And that his estimation was that the investment portfolio of the church was far, far more vast than what the revelations had been.
Wow. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, if we just restructured everything and suddenly Russie Nelson becomes not president, but CEO of the church, and it's not a church anymore, it's a corporation. Do you think his personal wealth...
It is legally the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Right. I'm saying if we took all religious ability to hide religious income away, do you think, Elon Musk is worth whatever, 200 and whatever billion? Do you think he would instantly become the richest person on the planet?
Yes.
In that same,
yes.
And do you think it would exceed $1 trillion?
No, I do not believe that. I believe he would be the richest, but it's interesting that when we're talking in the orders of magnitude in billions, that these numbers are like, they're fake, right? Like we're just saying these numbers. It's so impossible to try and like wrap our heads around what these numbers are. But the variance from $100 billion to $200 billion is a tiny amount when compared from the variance from $200 billion to $999 billion. Right. That amount of wealth is just such a massive and unconscionable gap. I don't think that the church has exceeded, what is that? A trillion, is trillion 14 figures, 15 figures? Is that right? I don't think the church has 15 figures of wealth. I think they do have 14 figures.
Okay. So you think they have 14, but not 15? Boy, that's interesting.
Well, so which is to say hundreds of billions, not trillions.
Yeah. And then it gets down to what you consider an asset and don't consider an asset. Because do they have over $1 trillion in activatable value? I could defend that, and just the fact that they run a theocratic United State. Like there's value that you could put up there, but as far as what you could actually turn into asset dollars.
Right. If they were forced to liquidate it, obviously, I mean, any massive corporation liquidating its investments is not going to realize the full value of what those things are prior to liquidation.
Right.
So what they could actually liquidate their assets for, who the fuck knows? Because the church's amount of wealth, them liquidating it, would legitimately have a noticeable statistical impact on the worldwide market.
Yeah.
That's how much fucking money the church has, that they can influence the worldwide stock market with how much money they have.
Let's do this. Let's take a call now, because it looks like we only have one currently holding on the line anyway, but so 720-619-2288, if you want to call in, you want to ask about Mormonism, you want to ask about stuff, let's take a call now, because if I don't take the call now, there's a chance the conversations I want to follow with will get done with the allotted time slot we have here today, and it'll be like,
okay,
it'll be we won't have taken a call, and we have to always take calls. So let's take Stephen in Arizona. Stephen in Arizona, you are on the line. How you doing?
I'm good, Jimmy. How are you?
Oh, I'm just peachy. You had a question for us.
Yeah, and I actually live in Mesa, Arizona, and we're always told that there are more Mormons here outside of Utah than anywhere else. So I live in a very Mormon neighborhood, actually. The missionaries that come to my door tend to be Baptist or Jehovah's Witnesses, so I don't know what that means.
Interesting.
But my question, when we hear about the fundamentalist sects of Mormonism, we hear a lot about them around the Arizona-Utah border in particular. But it seems like the distinction between the fundamentalist groups and the greater church seems to be really bad fashion sense along with polygamous marriage. And I just wondered how, because I'm in Arizona, we have a more narrow view. I wondered how prevalent FLDS sects are in the greater church, and also with respect to polygamous marriage, if there's the church now, as I understand it, is all about one man, one woman, and all that good stuff. Is there still an undercurrent or a desire to have plural marriage because you kind of gave that up to become part of the U.S.? So I was just curious about those two questions.
And both are going to have complicated answers to them, but I'm trying to remember what the first one was because now I'm so locked in on the second one. Do you remember what the first one was?
FLDS. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the prevalence of FLDS, how common it is, and I'm happy to address both of these. It's known as the Twin Cities of the FLDS, and that's Hilldale, Arizona, and Colorado City, Utah. And that's right on the border. And this is an area that was settled initially by Mormons because it's in the Morador area. And in the 1930s, the LDS Church decided to physically distance itself from any appearance of polygamy because they had outlawed polygamy in the church while they had canceled any sealings or any future sealings or polygamous marriages by 1905. And there was 2 decades there where the church was constantly assailed with the charges of polygamy. And that was beneficial for the church when they were embracing the practice of polygamy, but in order to gain statehood, they had to distance themselves from it. So the decades from 1905 to 1930, late 20s, early 30s, the church worked very hard to distance itself away from any group of Mormons living in the Utah area, Morador area, that were still actively practicing polygamy. And the geographic isolation of that area lend itself to the Mormons there being able to practice polygamy while being relatively insulated from oversight of any kind. So 1935 came along, I believe it was, and Lauren Woolley and a few other leaders essentially were excommunicated by the corporate church, and that's when the fundamentalist church was created and the Council of Friends was created. And the result of all of this was that the corporate church then worked with law enforcement agencies within Utah and Colorado in order to try and prosecute these individuals for cohabitation, for polygamy. And by taking an aggressive stance against these groups, the church essentially alienated all of these groups while at the same time trying to gain favor with the larger Christian right-wing movement that was very much popular at the time. And in doing so, of course, that made it so any fundamentalist groups who wanted to continue to practice or who wanted to begin the practice had to remain in hiding from the corporate church and from law enforcement now as two aligned enemies who were persecuting their religious practices. And that means that the growth of the FLDS church in the Twin Cities area grew as an isolated fundamentalist Mormon community, but it gained all the attention while there were dozens of others in the nearby area that grew without any attention. And that there's the Apostolic United Brethren that are headquartered in Salt Lake City, right? And if you just go down California Avenue in Salt Lake City past before Redwood Road, there's a huge settlement of AUB practitioners there, headquartered in Salt Lake. The Christ Church fundamentalists are headquartered in Elko, Nevada, I believe. There are just dozens and dozens of factions who we label broadly as fundamentalists because they're practicing the fundamentals of the church, And I mean, they're doing what the scriptures say, and the scriptures say that polygamy is the only way to get to heaven. So there's geographic isolation for the FLDS has diversified a bit. After Warren Jeffs was arrested, the FLDS Church underwent a bit of a restructuring process, and that caused them to essentially scatter. And what used to be about 15 to 20,000 people who were practitioners of FLDS living in the Twin Cities now is down to maybe a couple of thousand practitioners living there. The majority of the faithful Warren Jeffs fundamentalists have moved to South Dakota, to Texas, to Wyoming, and to other fundamentalist settlements. But that's, of course, just one fundamentalist group. There are dozens that are well known, and there are hundreds probably of people who decide to start their own study group and say this study group is going to practice the fundamentals. And it can be, one family who says we're going to do polygamy now, or it can be a couple of families, it can be a couple hundred people. And then the FLDS, of course, is the largest, with maybe somewhere between 10 and 15,000 current adherents scattered across the nation. That does lead to the second question quite well. Does the current church will it ever re-engage with polygamy? That's a tough one, because just considering the political sphere of the church and the aggressive stance it has taken on one man, one woman marriage policies, it seems like it would be quite a massive reversal. But on Naked Mormonism, I actually interviewed a researcher named Philippa Meek, and she essentially wrote a paper that viewed the decriminalization of polygamy as the next social justice movement, and opined on the possible directions that the church could go when the prospect of polygamy or legal polyamory does raise to the collective consciousness once the fight for same-sex marriage is over and finally concluded. The next step is going to be for polygamous marriages, and what stance will the church take on these issues? And I believe, if I remember, her conclusion was that the church is so retrenched in its conservative one-man, one-woman ideals right now that it would be probably many, many years lagging behind the rest of society before they went forward and finally re-embraced the doctrine of Doctrine and Covenants 132, which is the polygamy revelation. So yeah, kind of talked a long time there.
A lot of it's going to matter. Yeah, social stigma will also matter at that point, like whether or not polyamory or polygamy becomes legal. If it will make the church look bad to re-engage it, that'll be the thing that makes them delay the most, even though they're often willing to do things that make them look bad. General horniness and creepiness of the brethren will also matter. How much the individuals have their eye on some extra wives, and then also the makeup of the church and how many people are, how many men to women there are in the church, and how many of them are. If somehow the church demographics change where it's 4-to-1 women to men, then they will re-engage polygamy to keep everybody in the church and that sort of shit. But I don't know. It is going to be an interesting thing to see them then justify, when polygamy is so important to the church, that it's a thing that we did in the past, as that the church did in the past, but also is the future as well. Like it is part of after the millennium and people becoming gods, and there will be many more women that make it to the celestial kingdom than men, and therefore the men will start scooping up their celestial extra wives, and our God has multiple wives. It's a part of the whole thing. And so
this fight politically is in our lifetime, right? Like this is on the very near horizon that this fight is going to be happening. And that is on the political sphere, national political sphere of legally sanctioned polygamy. as well as how the church is going to respond to that. And it, like you said, Jimmy, it's going to very much come down to the leadership structure at the time and what they are likely to do, right? The only reason that black men were able to get the priesthood in 1978 was because Spencer W. Kimball was the most progressive prophet the church had had in many generations. If he wasn't prophet at the time, I mean, the prophets before him were experiencing the same pressure as Spencer W. Kimball was to lift the priesthood ban from black members, but they didn't relent to the pressure. Spencer W. Kimball did. So who the prophet is at the time, they exercise supreme directional control of the church. That is going to dictate the direction of the church and how much, like the church right now, it's pretty widely understood the church is undergoing a retrenchment phase right now into more conservative ideas. And the leadership has been catering to the more radical conservative elements of the church and has not been speaking out against them. And the current leadership structure, Dallin Oaks, is a monster. He is an absolute monster. He really is the guy pulling the strings right now. And the next people in line are all radical conservatives, just like Dallin Oaks is. The most progressive that the church leadership has in the future would be Dieter Uchtdorf, but he was publicly punished for being too progressive. So it doesn't bode well. It does not look good for the church. And
there's some other interesting things as well, like sort of you mentioning, not only will it come after, but it will be an extension of equality for queer rights. It's not, in other words, it's not necessarily just the next thing, but it's the next phase of all of that. And so publicly and socially, when polyamory is destigmatized as well as decriminalized, it will be about, culturally, we'll be talking about multiple people of multiple genders, not just still some version of straight polyamory, which is, a sort of, trying to remember what it's called, asterisk style amongst polyamory observing people, where you have the one person in the middle, and then they are dating all the offshoots of the asterisk, but none of the offshoots of the asterisks are dating each other. That's a singular style. Now, often in polyamory, those individuals can go and date other people, just not they generally aren't dating the other legs of the asterisk. Mormonism would literally just say asterisk style only, man in the middle, women offshoots, do not touch each other ever, you women offshoots. And so it would almost be, as the world is becoming more progressive, for them to then say like, okay, we're going to bring back polygamy, would mean that 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, they're also saying, and we're going to reaffirm this many decades after, probably an equal rights amendment and all of those things. We're going to reaffirm that this has to be heteronormative polygamy, which would be
and specifically
wildly
polygyny.
Unpopular.
Yeah, and polygyny is one man, multiple women, and that's a very important distinction, because the Mormon practice of polygamy is not polyamory; it is polygyny. It is one man with multiple wives, so it is still very discriminatory. And I think there is a much larger point to take out of all of this and to consider of like, I've been on the record now, and I'm happy to declaring it here. I think the church is trying to get out of the marriage business. I think they are trying to move towards a future where the sealing ceremony it's essentially performed when people get married in the temple. There's a ceremony that is performed as part of the marriage that is essentially a sealing ceremony, which seals them together for eternity. And I believe that the church is trying to move away from conducting marriages in order to make the sealings the ordinance, to make that the ordinance that lives on. And then they can continue to discriminate, because it's pretty reasonable to consider that in the future there could be a reality where religions are required to solemnize same-sex marriages. And that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. That's going to make a whole lot of Christian bigots really fucking mad. And good, it should. They're bigots. They deserve to be, angered by something like that. But if a law does come down that forces anybody who is going to solemnize marriage to solemnize marriages equally among all genders, then that is going to force the church's hand. They are going to get out of the marriage business and say, the only thing we do in the temple now is sealings. in which case it is a purely religious practice with absolutely no civil analog. There's no civil benefit to being sealed. It is only religious, and that will allow them to continue to discriminate forever and ever.
Yeah. It's that's already part of, in places in Europe, that's already done, where it's, you go get sealed at the temple. I'm trying to remember the order that you go. I think it's they ask you to go be married first. That way you can't, that's enough to, in case you have sex on the way to the temple, you haven't committed a sin.
That's right.
And then you get sealed sometime after the fact. They separate it out to avoid some of that stuff. Yeah, I get it. And I think, I think you're quite right that it's going to become separated out and become more about the sealings. Steven, did we answer your question and the 9 other questions you didn't ask?
Yes, in abundance. And I did have more, but I will let you go because you've done your time. I appreciate it.
If you got something you want to pose to us, we're good, man. You got another question you want to throw down? Throw down.
Just real quick. Just real quick to your point. With the makeup of the Supreme Court, I fully expect same-sex marriage to be challenged and potentially overturned. Would that change your timeline for all of this as you explained it?
No, I don't think so. Because the overturning of Obergefell right now will be a very short-lived overturning. That will mobilize so many progressives that the conservative elements within the government will no longer be able to withstand it. So if Obergefell, the only reason that we have same-sex marriage legal right now is because of a Supreme Court decision. If the Supreme Court decides to overturn their decision from 7 years ago, that will mobilize enough people that will force the federal government to pass a bill that makes it so same-sex marriage is federally legal. So when that happens, I think that is going to be, who knows, maybe a couple of years of time that progressives have to mobilize really hard against this. But that will very quickly return back to the progressive side.
The church also has recognized where it is a mistake to push against gay issues. So now they do lots of very symbolic things to suggest they actually support queer marriage in America while still fighting against it in other parts of the world. Right. And they speak, they will never, I don't think they're ever going to apologize, but they speak as though they've progressed beyond the thinking that led to them basically financing Proposition 8, which ironically, isn't it Prop 8 and maybe there was another one called Prop 14 somewhere. Those are what led to the Supreme Court cases that ultimately made queer marriage legal. So anyway, it's the church. I don't think the church is going to come out against gay marriage again in any part of the, we'll say, Western world, probably. But they are still going to be supporting things that in roundabout ways are going to try and harm those institutions as much as they can, but they won't publicly say. We're probably past the time of hearing letters read out loud in English, especially to the congregations of, remember the institution of marriage and how holy it is, and there is an election, and while we won't tell you which way to vote, we will tell you what thing is on the docket and what the position on the church is on that situation, and then suggest you go vote according to your conscience with those things considered. That sort of, I think we're probably past that.
Well, I mean, the church has a new punching bag, and just like the larger conservative movement does, and that's trans people, right? So, it's so last decade to be punching on the gays, so now they're going to be punching on the transes. That's just how these things evolve and adapt, right? So, the church has done things that are symbolic, like saying, "Look how progressive we are," like supporting a bill that passed in Utah legislature that made it so that people could not discriminate for employment and for housing based on gender. The church made the support of that, and they were very vocal in public about them supporting that bill. the only reason they supported it was because it had a religious exemption in it. Right? So like they make a big hubbub about being progressive to try and not scare off the younger members who are fleeing from the church like it's on fire. But what they're really doing is just carefully wording things. The same thing that they did with Prop 8.
Yeah. As far as, again, it's going to be what they put out publicly and the face they put out publicly is going to be pretend support. It's going to be virtue signaling types of support. But then what actually happens in legislatures, I mean, this isn't just with queer stuff. They did this with weed. Overwhelming support for the legalization of medical marijuana, and then the church. I know that won the vote, but we're going to use our institutional power and the power we have to influence legislatures to just go ahead and change that law. So fuck y'all who needed this medicine.
It has always been a theocracy.
Indeed.
From the time the Mormons got there and it was Mexico, it has always been a theocracy.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else for us, Stephen, before we let you go?
No, I think we're good, Jimmy. Thanks so much.
Tight. All right. See you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm going to take Clark in California, but Clark, I'm going to tell you right on the onset, we'll probably keep this semi-brief because we are sort of a little bit topic focused today. I'm not going to hang up on you. We might keep it a little more brief, and then I'll probably suggest you either call, if you want to talk to me specifically, call back Sunday when it's Matt and I on the Sunday show, or see if I do a Cause I Wanted this weekend. Potentially, this is also a topic I'm sure Matt would take on tomorrow's show Wednesday. But Clark in California, you are on the line, who wants to suggest that objective morality points to the existence of God.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know the topic. Did you want me to argue for objective morality or something else?
Yeah, so when you called in, I take it you didn't actually open the show and see what we were talking about, I assume, right? And I'm not shitting on you for it. No. Okay, yeah. So tonight's topic has been more about Mormonism, and we've been talking about it because both of us are from the Mormon Church. I'm happy to hear your point because it always intrigues me, and I'm always sort of interested in arguing with theists about religion. But like I said, we'll probably keep it a little bit more brief because I want to maximize on the actual topic at hand.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I was wondering, so do you think that moral statements are propositional?
Wait, are you the sublate guy?
What?
Did you call in like a week or two ago with the whole thing about the sublation of moral arguments are propositional? Was that not you? Maybe it wasn't you, Clark. If you don't recognize what I'm saying right away.
Talking about yeah, I mean, it didn't have anything to do with ethics, that argument.
That was your proof of God, though, right? Yeah. And I said that was
a separate argument.
That I might shop if you sent me all the premises, I might shop your thing around.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize I was talking to you last time too.
Yeah.
I was the one who was talking to you last time.
So what's your position you want to put? Because you called in with your argument and immediately started to do what I know is a script. So instead of you trying to do a script of questions where you're going to see if you can catch me, why don't you just make your proposal?
Well, it's not a script, but my argument is for panentheism,
right?
Which is the idea that everything is contained within the absolute idea or God, and it's by everything I mean like a process ontology that's like going through a process of completion. Every stage in the process is going to be significant and like you have a unique nature. And so the specific stage that I'm arguing for is with regards to like metaethics, specifically moral statements being propositional, and those moral propositions having a nature such that when we try to accurately characterize the nature of each moral proposition, we're always going to be adverting to a non-natural property or a normative relation. So that's sort of the idea.
Clark,
I could give the
real quick, Clark, are you a Christian or anything? Did your panentheism then develop into a specific religion?
Yeah, so I would say it's a little tricky, but I would say yes in a sense and no in another sense, because just real quick, Christianity to me is the highest order of aesthetic judgment. So it's a significant movement of identity in the process. The aesthetic judgments, the aesthetic values are a specific movement of identity in the process that I'm talking about. So in a sense, yes, that Christianity is the highest order of those aesthetic experiences.
Clark, how much Jordan Peterson do you watch in a week?
I really don't like Jordan Peterson.
Okay, that's a relief. I think I asked you this last time too. Yeah. It's weird though, because y'all, it's like you're from the, it's like how Matt and I sometimes get in each other's face because we're constantly talking like each other. Anyway, Clark, here's the deal. When we're all talking and we're coming here and we're chilling out and we're having these conversations and stuff, and we're not doing formal debates. Basically, you've brought another topic that would be more of a topic for a formal debate situation than a call-in show. I'm not saying that we won't engage at all. If you want to call back on Sunday, I'd say that's the best day to probably do it, and then I'll do my best with you at that time, and then sip to the topic today. But I got to tell you, when I ask a person if they believe Christianity is true or if they are a Christian, what I'm asking is, yesterday you're aware of events that happened in the world, and you know what events actually happened. And you either do or don't believe that around 2,000 years ago, in the same way that those events happened, a dude called Jesus came to earth, was born, lived some type of life that we know virtually nothing about, and then he's put up on a cross, and this individual was basically the human manifestation of God, and then he's resurrected after dying for the redemption of the sins of people. Do you believe that? And just a yes or no would be great.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So.
Yeah, but I think it's all symbolic. Just to add the nuance there.
Wait, what do you mean it's all symbolic? You believe that it literally happened, or that it's a story?
Well, I mean, I'm an idealist, so everything that, even like concepts that we think of like that don't have, like, presumably, like, at least intuitively have any real existence, like if we imagine a unicorn or something, it still has some existence, is what I'm getting at. So
But I just asked you, holy shit, Clark, did you listen to all of my setup? Did you listen to everything that, because I accounted for that kind of bullshit, having talked to Panentheus and you before. I accounted for that and talked about, in the same way as you know what things happened yesterday, that yesterday has a literal history that actually happened, in the same way, in as much as we can know anything happened. In that same regard, do you believe the core tenet histories of Christianity? Do you believe that Jesus Christ, not it happened because people believed it happened, not because they imagined? Do you believe that, like what happened yesterday, Jesus Christ was resurrected? That's not a question of symbolism or not.
No, and I did answer yes, but just to clarify, this is the same issue we ran into last time. You said yes,
but it's symbolic.
Hold on. Just
no. You don't get to tell me to hold on. I'm clarifying what you just said. You said yes, and then you said, in a moment, you said yes, you just corrected me and didn't actually provide the whole thing, which wasn't a correction if you provided the whole thing. You said yes, but it's symbolic. And this is why this is what I'm getting onto you about, because either you believe it's the literal history of the world or it's symbolic, not both. Go ahead, give your explanation.
Well, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it can be both in a sense, and that's what I'm getting at, because they're sublating. And what I'm saying to clarify is that this is the issue we had last time that you kicked me off. Well, this is the issue that you kicked me off last time without letting me address, is that I'm not accepting your notion of time that you're sneaking in there. I don't think time works that way. Time is the movement of identity emptying itself into its own negation. So it's an inward negation, moving inwardly, but it's realizing its own moments in time, and that's why when we sublate time, we get time dilation.
I think
so this is what's happening, and that's the movement of the
Clark, I think that you have. I don't know if you need more weed or less.
I think you're a slow boy who doesn't understand philosophy.
Oh, is that what it is?
That's why you can't engage with the point.
Clark,
yeah, I think that's what it is.
It's such self-important nonsense to when we're talking about, as we jump in and say what we mean by did it happen, and you said yes, but it's symbolic and these aren't mutually exclusive. Of course symbolically there is the representation of Christianity in people's mind, and then your whole thing of I reject your concept of time. Well, Clark, then just go back 2,000 years ago and participate with time in a way that rejects my representation of it. Because as much as you want to orally say, I don't understand and I'm a slow boy, blah, 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 get into ableist terminology because frankly, you are a little Peterson cuck, whether or not you like the fucker or not. It doesn't matter. You're going to participate in time the way I'm representing time because I'm representing time as it exists, as it is present to us. And so your whole fucking thing, then go back 2,000 years and take your fucking camera with you. And Clark, please go sublate yourself. I don't give a shit. Fuck off, man. I just hung up. I don't give a fuck. Because it's not a script. I don't need a script anymore to sniff my own farts. I know right where to put my nose and how hard to inhale. It's not a script. Clark, no one gives a fuck about it's this entirely like, oh my God, I feel like I've big brained this to the point. And if I just use these terminologies and these concepts, which by the way, the thing I pointed out last time was the concepts he's come up with are so reliant on things that are only decades old as arguments, because I actually have an awareness of philosophical arguments. I just think the conversations are fucking useless, especially when we're talking about how we spend our day to day, in the same way that I don't think a person's interaction with medical science has to be that you are a doctor, or else you can't even take medicine. You can't even acknowledge, you can't even line up what your medical future is going to be. It's this, several of his points are reliant on things that are only decades old, which would mean his like tremendous big brain, I'm here talking to the slow boys thing. If he was somehow right, he'd also have to concede that there hasn't been a single rational Christian prior to basically his existence. And so Clark calls in every time, not recognizing that he has such this narcissistic view of everyone's been wrong until the moment I was born. Billions and billions of people, and I figured out how to make Christianity true. It is self-aggrandizing, self-fart-smelling, just nonsense. So go sublate yourself in a sublation tank. I don't care. It's not useful. He called me a slow boy though. It's very funny. Did you want in on that, Bryce? I'm sorry I got rid of him before.
No, I mean, not particularly, because I don't see a whole lot of utility in if we can't even agree on a definition of time being the passage of events, then and we have to become abstract in our definition of time in order for something to equally be symbolic as well as literal, then we have lost tethering to planet Earth, right? We're not we're not playing around on terra firma anymore. We're just dancing around inside of a vat of jelly that all of our brains are in. So I don't see a whole lot of use in it. And at the end of the day, those arguments are used to substantiate Christianity and Mormonism and Islam and any other belief in metaphysical or supernatural entities. So
yeah, it's the point. It's basically self-aggrandizing magical thinking where you sit here and go, you know how people are annoying when they're pedantic? I can make you want to drive a screwdriver through your head with how pedantic I can be. Well, it's the
also
height
just
of pedantry.
Profoundly like elitist as well to put forward a philosophical claim and say that my current belief structure is the one that is the pinnacle of these logical arguments. And logical arguments can be internally consistent without standing up to outside scrutiny. Mormon theology is something that is incredibly internally consistent. But when you ask a skeptical question from the outside, it doesn't hold up. And I find many arguments for the existence of God to be, they can be logically constructed arguments that are not premised on anything that is tangible, that is factual.
Yeah.
And so it's purely masturbatory, and
truly.
You know, hey,
Clark, a little bit.
Look, I just got to be in the mood. Right. If we're all going to be whacking ourselves off, then like, yeah, let's like do it right. Right.
Clark, a little bit of advice from a slow boy, as you put it, for you. If somebody asks you a yes or no question, saying yes and then but where you basically suggest that, let me think of how to reword it. Answering yes does not remove the nuance which follows. And so answering the yes or no question and then trying to go yes, but I actually want to hide behind the kind of no, even though we're doing something Socratic here. But I'm a slow boy. I'm not aware of anything philosophical. So just makes you look like, and I've Googled the philosophical term. I want to make sure that you hear this. It's I think I'm pronouncing this right. It makes you look like a pedantic cunt. That's the philosophical term. I can send you peer review if you need to hear that. If you need it, go sublate yourself, you pedantic cunt. Anyway, Tyler in New York, how you doing? You're on the line.
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I'm here. Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Wow. I'm laughing because that previous call. Wow.
Tell me to go sublate myself. I dare you. I'm just kidding. It's all good.
No, that was just a brilliant smack down. I don't know how you can hold X and not X at the same time. Wow. I'm calling today, and forgive me if this is not relevant to the broad subject matter today, and if you want to move on to another caller, I totally understand. I'm calling because I want to ask you about atheism and political labels. More specifically because I became an atheist about a year ago.
You deconverted.
And deconverted, yes, that's the term. But I noticed that my political views are not necessarily left or right, and I find that, and I'm not accusing of anybody, but from my observation, I've noticed that a lot of Christians tend to be politically on the right, and a lot of atheists tend to be on the political left, and it confuses me on multiple levels. And I just wanted to ask you your opinion on when somebody takes a specific ideology, that a lot of times people will then take a basket of views on a whole host of issues. Like, I don't understand how my atheism tells you what I think on gun control, or even what my thoughts on gun control tells you my perspective on healthcare. And I just wanted to ask you, why is it that there seems to be this binary?
I'm going to tell you, Tyler, and I feel like I can't do it without offending you a little, so I want you to be prepared to be offended a little.
Go ahead.
Okay?
It's
because you have a Western-focused view. You have a United States-focused view, which we here have the illusion of there being a binary choice of Republican or Democrat. I am neither, by the way. I am far further left of a Democrat. I make Democrats look like Republicans. I am anti-gun personally as a human. I think it's fucking crazy we all have guns, but I am pro-gun politically. In fact, I have been telling people a lot lately, if you are trans or queer, go get some guns. They are not afraid of you. And they maybe should be. Not because you're going to do something with it, but because they can't just conquer you with the fact that they have guns and you don't. And so we have the political illusion of the binary political choice here is it's reinforced by American culture, but it's not real. It's you can be politically very left. Now, the trend of conservatism to be related especially to Christianity, because this is another illusion that's a Western-based illusion, and especially a U.S.-based illusion, is the conservatism, the purity checkers for conservatisms and the purity checkers for conservatism and the purity checkers for especially more fundamentalist forms of Christianity sort of mandate the other. So as a Mormon, you're going to feel like you have to be conservative. Otherwise, you are going to be treated like shit. You will be mocked, and socially you will not participate in a way that and then vice versa. Conservatives largely are going to reject atheists, even as they do get their couple of tokens out there. But it's sort of that the ideologies of conservative policy and the ideology of religious fundamentalism is Christian religious fundamentalism. There's so much overlap between the two that it's sort of a natural extension. But do keep in mind also, within that illusion that you're describing, most people were religious regardless of political affiliation until very recently. And so I don't know what the breakdown is of the Democratic Party, but it's still mostly Christian. So there is still a break out of that intercept. And this is that same illusion where we see conservative Christianity represented so loudly, and then we associate the opposition to that with some sort of secular leftism, even though it's neither leftist nor secular. These are illusions, basically. But personally, I think atheist as a political label and atheist as a label in general gets the fuck on my nerves, because the least interesting thing about me is the fact that I'm an atheist. Bryce, did you have thoughts on that? Sorry, Tyler, we're real quick. Let's let Bryce get his thoughts in, and then you're welcome to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's important to notice large trends that span multiple decades, and I'm trying to word this delicately. People being outraged, or people being aligned together under a very broad spectrum, or under a very broad label, is something that becomes very predictable and very useful. So if people are able to align together under a collective structure of ideals, then it is very easy for organizers of those collective ideals, or the owners of those labels, to dictate the directions of those groups of people. And I mean, any time that somebody wants to like drop the pin and say that like, here, this time in America is when the conservative political party decided to jump in bed with the radical Christians. There's always many events and many populist leaders before that predate those events. So it's just a very long trend that results in the alignment of a conservative majority that happens to fall under one belief structure that is a shared collective identity that they can use to identify each other, that then allows those people to align in motivations and end goals. And when there's a large group of people who then adhere to the same label of Christian or of conservative or of progressive or of Democrat or whatever, then people who are looking to lead those movements can see that there's an incestuous relationship between the ideas that they grasp and that they hold on to and that they champion in order to be seen as a leader of those ideals. And this happens in progressive spheres, and this happens in conservative spheres as well. And I think there is I do want to also state there are differences between the political parties. There are differences between the people who tend to adhere to the conservative versus the progressive sides of the aisles. And I believe that there is one political party that does tend to adhere more to authoritarianism and to populism and champions those ideas. And that creates a feedback loop where the people who are part of that political organization or that religious organization then seek people to lead those organizations who champion those same ideals. And this has a feedback escalation cycle that then allows America to be run by somebody who's criminally insane and who at their heart is a tyrant. We got lucky with Trump, right? Like, America dodged a fucking massive bullet with Trump, and we're still not past dodging it yet. We still haven't successfully outmaneuvered this fucking rabid movement that is trying to break the country apart at its seams. But the people who adhere to Trumpism are the result of many, many decades long of people fomenting rage and division against their neighbors. And because that is incredibly useful and it is incredibly predictable. until it gets to the point that it's not predictable. Like, it was predictable that a riot would happen at the Capitol. What happened after that riot was unpredictable. So people can be fomented into a rage and they can be channeled in a certain direction. But what happens after they do a certain violent act is always up for grabs. That is always the larger question. And the populist movement that conservative Christian conservative Christianity has right now is fucking dangerous. It is terrifying, and it is dangerous, and it is a result of many, many decades of wedge issues being coalesced into an umbrella ideal.
Right, and that's if you don't mind me jumping in at that point and sort of like using that. Yeah, I find it interesting too, because you're right that there's a lot of people on the political right, especially in the Republican Party, that form this coalition and are causing a lot of harm in society. And for me personally, I find it really frustrating because there are some, admittedly, I'm going to tell you, there are some policy issues that I tend to agree with on the right. Not everything. I'm, for example, pro-choice. I am pro-LGBT. I lean more libertarian, but not fully, because there's some anarchists in the Libertarian Party, and I'm like, that's a bit extreme. Like, you still need to have like a functioning government to provide roads.
Well, Tyler, by the way, what I think you're trying to describe, and this is why I say like the binary that you're seeing is an illusion based on the fact that you live in the U.S. and it feels like that.
Exactly.
Big L libertarian is the party you're describing. I am a small L libertarian socialist. You can be both, a small L libertarian. So I have a tendency to think if adults are only harming themselves, you don't fuck with that. As long as the harm a person is doing doesn't extend beyond that person, they're not violating other people's autonomy or whatever, you don't fuck with people what they want to do.
Absolutely. The non-aggression principle. And that, like, it's really frustrating because, like, I've been called a progressive by my more conservative friends and a very staunch right-winger from my liberal friends, and I really hate the false dichotomy in American politics, because I've voted for Republican candidates before and I've voted for Democratic candidates, and as an atheist, when you look at the span of history, for example, and you go back to the Enlightenment period, obviously you can find counterexamples to what I'm about to say, but a lot of the skeptics of the Enlightenment period were also in favor of sort of like a laissez-faire economy. And yet, today, a lot of the proponents of capitalism also want to, tell you what you can and can't do with your love life. They want to pass laws to restrict abortion. And also, they want to engage in useless wars, which I just find it, if you're in favor of limited government, then why would you want to have an exploding military? It just seems like a contradiction in political philosophy. And yeah, it just seems ridiculous that in American politics, you only really have two choices, even though there are third parties, but the two mainstream parties are the only two that really have a chance of winning. And it's like you go to the grocery store and you have hundreds of options for different food items, but yet electing officials who will make policy choices that affect our lives, you effectively only have two. And that's something that I find extremely annoying.
Yeah, I mean, we only have the two people usually to vote for sure. And as we're trying to shape a political future, when you aren't in those camps, you have to go with the one that's going to get you closer to eventually being represented, but acknowledging that you're not represented now. And so, unfortunately, that's just the sort of way it is. And in 2008, somebody like AOC wasn't even possible, even though Barack Obama was able to win the presidency that year. And you get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. Now, I'm not AOC, and I don't line up on a lot of issues also. I'm, once again, further left than her as well. But she's much closer, and representation like hers is much closer. And the possibility of a popular movement that results in her eventual presidency is exciting if we're talking about progress. But instead, everything that is politically relevant has also been reduced to Twitter memes and Elon Musk creepily projecting his attraction to her pretty nonstop. Don't.
Oh yeah.
Fucking. God. Fucking. He just
fascinating world.
Yeah, I mean,
just needs to be quiet.
In 2016 and 2020, if I remember correctly, in 2016, I registered for the Republican Party, but to vote for Rand Paul. But then in the general election, I don't think I voted for anybody, if I recall, in 2016. But in 2020, I voted for Jo Jorgensen. And even her, I'm like, there's still...
So you're planning to make a good vote at some point? I'm sorry, Tyler. I couldn't resist. Too terrible.
No, that's a fair point. I mean, I voted for Democrats before because I tend to
I would have, even if you had added Joe Biden somewhere in there, I would have also said, look, voting third party is pointless at the moment. It is not pragmatic, and you should choose the lesser of two evils because the lesser of two evils is better. But Jo Jorgensen's a fucking joke. I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. She's so much of a joke. She responded to me on Twitter once. That's how low she is.
Right.
And Rand Paul's just evil, just a bad person.
Who is?
Rand Paul. There are things I liked about his dad. I also wouldn't vote for his dad. There are things I liked about Ron Paul. And I would even say things that I find important, that Ron Paul is foundationally important to the future. Rand Paul is a giant sack of shit. Just a big old collection of shit. Worse than Biden. Yeah.
Worse than Biden.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah. How do you make that determination, if you don't mind me asking?
Rand Paul is not an. I understand that you have these draws towards certain big L libertarian ideals. Big L libertarianism is a fucking nightmare realm of mostly white people who are very content or close to content or project future contentness with their life and would like to basically ignore all of the foundational things that came before them and then remove those same foundational things that will support other people for their future to the benefit of themselves. It is a position of contentness. But I won't even give Rand Paul that he is some big L libertarian. Rand Paul is far closer to just conservative extremist. And
I agree to a certain extent because he supported Trump, and that's where I was like, ooh.
But even, I mean, as a medical person, look at, first of all, how he even became a physician. Kind of a fucked up story where the roundabout way is that he ended up, if I'm remembering the details right, basically participated in creating the board which approved his being a physician. And then look at his the illiteracy of him as a physician as he is participating in some of these trials regarding vaccines and shit. It is fucking, he is a wildly incompetent person from the ground up, and I rarely see him make a point that, like I said, I liked Ron Paul because Ron Paul would make points that I would emphatically agree with. And I liked the way he upset and changed the right. I don't like Rand Paul because Rand Paul is a Trump cuck who just shows incompetency every step of the way. And there is an element of nepotism also. I don't enjoy political nepotism generally.
I would agree with that. But if you don't mind me asking, forgive me, you're making a point about how like a lot of big L libertarians just want to keep the status quo in a way.
No, not at all. I don't think the status quo. I think they want to maintain their contentness. That doesn't mean maintaining the status quo for the world. Quite the opposite. I think they want to remove regulations and remove things in the way that they see as really just slight. They will get a slight increase to their potential fortune, contentness, and whatever at the absolute cost of a lot of other people suffering. I think it is one of the most politically selfish, egotistical, narcissistic political positions you could take. I'm not calling everybody who does it a narcissist. However, it's fucking gross.
Could you provide like an example of that, like policy-wise, where they're trying to do that?
I mean, you could just summarize any time that they want some tax program that has direct welfare benefits to would they want to sacrifice that to get a slight pay increase from tax decreases?
It's very simple. Anyone advocating for laissez-faire capitalism is an anti-human.
Yeah.
They are advocating for a system, a rolling back of a lot of progress that has been made in the sphere of regulating large corporations and regulating the abuses that the large corporations have over people, right? Like laissez-faire capitalism leads to slavery. And I know that they're like, we can get lost in discussions of like, oh, you working for Walmart, you're a slave. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying laissez-faire capitalism led to the global slave trade. And anyone who is advocating for that and doing so are advocating for the rolling back of regulations, they are trying to get the world back towards or turn the direction of progress towards the systems that we outgrew as a society 100 years ago. That's unacceptable behavior.
There are some libertarians who are anarchists. I am not an anarchist.
We're not myself. Talking about anarchy.
No. Anarchy and slave trade are not mutually exclusive,
not
right?
At
like
all, even.
The slave trade in many places was actually a little bit regulated, right? Like America's states had slave codes for how to actually legitimately regulating the way that people treated their slaves. But a sense of laissez-faire capitalism led to the slave trade being possible.
Well, the slave trade was possible because of an abuse in state power. Capitalism is independent on whether or not slavery existed. Slavery is a violation of basic human rights, and I just don't see the link there between capitalism and slavery.
I think he just laid it out for you pretty good.
Sure, go ahead.
I think he just did. I think we'd have to now repeat ourselves.
Look, so
the
the only reason that we don't have slavery by the standards of what slavery used to be in this country is because we outlawed slavery by that definition, but because of regulations that exist that string the hands of business owners and force them to provide things for their workers. And that comes from everything from providing a minimum living wage to making sure that people who are working with hazardous materials are provided with the proper safety equipment so that the materials don't kill them. And like you can look at many points within American history specifically. I only tap into that because that's my personal specialty, where the boundaries of capitalism have been pressed, and then the government had to come in and say, no, that's too much. And one here's a great example, right? Laissez-faire capitalism would allow companies to grind up uranium and put it into a health tonic and sell it to people and claim that it cures their cancer. Laissez-faire capitalism allows for that. But the government said Radithor can't be sold because it's killing people.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is where
regulation is a good thing.
I don't disagree. I think certain regulations can be a good thing for sure. Every single example that you cited, I 1,000% agree with you. I think there is a legitimate role for the state in protecting individual liberty, protecting the well-being of consumers. Perhaps.
Do you think Tyler? Do you think it should play any role in basically equalizing things which are systemic injustices? Because right now, when we're talking about libertarian status quo, I would say the one status quo libertarians are trying to maintain for sure, but with only mild increases to their own position, is the current reality, which is if you are born a winner, you die a winner. If you are born poor, you die poor. If you are born middle class, you die middle class. It's very few people deviate from that. And it's still the problem because we don't do enough to balance it. It is the easiest way to be rich is to be born rich. The easiest way to be fed is to be born with food. It's a wildly disgusting and unjust thing. And then even talking about slavery before, it is problems with the capitalist system that has prevented us from moving past it. One second, Tyler, from moving past it. We're still doing slavery, and it is still very much attached to old slavery, and you can directly show the path of events of slavery became illegal, and that yet still all of these laws and cultural things that were reinforced kept people in poverty, and they're in poverty today because of a failure of the state to actually equalize those situations. So do you believe the state should play that role or not?
Do I think the state should have a role? Like, in what sense? Like, I'm a little. That seems a little ambiguous, in my opinion.
I think I just gave a pretty good example to say, like, yes, the state should jump in, but right now you get especially a lot of people on the political right, including libertarians, freaking out because this also sort of exists in that umbrella of CRT. Should economic disparities be equalized? Should the fact that the uber rich are a tiny proportion hogging all of the wealth and letting a small percentage of the wealth that exists be shared amongst everybody else, should the state jump in and equalize that, which I believe should be self-evidently incredibly immoral reality?
No, I don't think the state should eliminate disparities. I think what the state should do is to eliminate barriers that are caused by power imbalances.
How do you do one without the other? Because the barrier right now is rich people hog all the goddamn wealth and have no problem hogging all the goddamn wealth and letting everybody else share the scraps. So
how do you explain the increases the standard of living over the past 200 to 300 years? Like, see, the thing is
rising tide. That's technological innovation that happens with every civilization.
Yeah, and by the way, you can also all along the way figure out who got rich. Right now we're going through a problem of rising rents because of the greed of these goddamn people, and we're starting to see decreases in quality of life as people aren't able to afford, despite working 40 to 60 hours a week, much more than a shed to sleep in. So I don't know. If you want to talk about the overall increase, we can talk about those trends, and then we can talk about those same systemic barriers of the people who were born winners are putting on everybody else.
Do you think that a poor person born in the United States, compared to, say, somebody in Peru or another state that doesn't really have much economic mobility, can rise to a satisfactory to themselves, a satisfactory level of income? Like, do you think
I think that this is the equivalent of when...
No. I want to respond to that.
I think we might be going the same place. I'll give mine quickly and then let you... I think you're doing the equivalent of when we put a religious person in a corner and then they start questioning whether or not we believe anything exists. The solipsistic. Well, how do we even know? I think you are now retreating into this sort of... And I always see it from politically right people, this sort of like, well, the standard of living over here versus the standard of living over there. But go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, comparing the standard or the quality of life of Americans to the quality of life of a Peruvian is an arbitrary and useless comparison. The lived experiences of an American living in suburbia, Pennsylvania, like I live in, is going to be so vastly different to somebody living in the heart of the Bronx in New York, or to somebody living in Peru, or to somebody living anywhere else on the planet. So trying to say that, like, Americans now are living better than they've ever lived, while that is an accurate statement, it is a factual statement, it is not a useful statement. It does not move the conversation forward, and it is simply a retreating and a declaration of, well, life is better for more people now, so how did we get this? Well, you have to establish a causal link between the rising the standard of living of Americans to the capitalism, or the laissez-faire capitalism that America has never technically had, and compare it to a mirrored timeline of America with an extremely strict and rigid socialistic or a communistic American governmental structure that has extremely rigid regulations, and compare a fictional communistic America standard of living person to a current America standard of living person. If we were trying to compare people who live in totally different places on the planet under totally different governmental structures right now to each other, there are way too many variables to take into account for that comparison to actually hold any merit. It doesn't do anything for us. All it does is say, hey, I live a different life than somebody living in Peru. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And Tyler, before I let you go on, I'm just going to say, get your super chats in about Mormonism so we end the show today. We've got one more call after Tyler. We're going to wrap this one up in a second. But get your super chats in about Mormonism so we can get back to the topic tonight, because that would be great. Tyler, I think last thing I'm going to say to you is the fact of the matter, the situation is you got a neighborhood, and your neighborhood has 100 people. And in that neighborhood of 100 people, roughly half of them have enough grain to survive, and they're working hard enough to get that grain to survive. And maybe they have a little bit of extra grain so that they can take a day off from getting grain. And then some amount of them, close to half, but a little bit less, have actually less than enough grain to survive well. They are suffering for their grain. And right now, they are often getting a little bit of extra grain from the group of the other half who takes a little bit of their excess. And there are programs that group gets to support the other group. And then you got the one guy in the neighborhood who has a mansion, and in his mansion is enough grain for thousands of people for the rest of their lives. And right now, as far as I can tell, the conservative and large L libertarian movement is not just content for that to continue. They'd like to suggest to some of that middle group, hey, those programs right now where you're supporting, and maybe some of these libertarians are in that middle group, where you are supporting these poorer people who don't have enough grain, maybe that shouldn't be the case either. Maybe we should be backing that off, and you should be enjoying your little extra grain. And hopefully the guy in the mansion with the thousands of grain for thousands of people, hopefully he'll realize the benefit and create programs that for some other exchange of goods, something these poor people can give to him, he can redistribute out some of that grain to them. Though in reality, the thing we see every year is he figures out how to get them less and less grain every year, how to shave a little bit more grain out of their pocket and add to his coffers with the thousands. And this is why I'm a fucking socialist. We ought to go take that goddamn grain and distribute it to the rest of the fucking neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, the dude in the big house has to die for that to happen. I'm a pacifist, but sometimes I can be persuaded.
The guy in the big house might become the grain, just so you know, Tyler.
Right. There's like so many different points that I wanted to address, like, for example, the rent. But I know you got to go on to other callers, and this is like a conversation that could last for hours. I mean, I studied economics in college for 4 years, and I don't think we even got to like 1%, but that's okay. I love this channel, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, Tyler, like I said, I'm glad we can have these conversations where I told you at the beginning I'm going to insult you, and it's fine. And we can insult each other back and forth, and it'd be like, an insult doesn't have to be taken personally, because frankly, Tyler, you don't know me and I don't know you, right? Like, you know me a little better than I know you, but neither of us know each other. Why would we take this personally in the first place? Now, all the shit Bryce has been saying in our private chat about how ugly I look today, that hurts. We're friends, and that hurts. But Tyler, thank you for calling.
Thank you.
We're only friends publicly.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks,
Tyler.
I know that the comments are going to be full of why my grain example that is meant to be simplified to the point an idiot can understand it is going to be, well, that doesn't represent the nuance of this and the nuance of this, but I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fucking fuck, but let's go eat the man in the big house. That's the point.
All right, I'm down. Let's do it.
Eat the grain rich. Anyway, last call before we do super chats. Do send in your super chats, $5 or more, and we will read them out at the end and answer them. But we have, well, real quick, Bryce, are you good on time? We're not over when you need to go?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay, yeah, Bonnie in Colorado, you are on the line.
Hi.
Hey, before we start,
want to know.
Before we start, because your microphone is clipping. We've been having this lately. I don't know what's happening, but some people when they call, it's real sensitive to the call-in system. If you can either take us off speaker or physically move your mic, even if you have to turn at your earpiece down to like your neck, that seems to improve the situation. Your mic's just real sensitive, and it sounds like popcorn is popping when you talk.
Okay, I will try. I'm not on speaker, and I actually don't have the TV on because I didn't want to have feedback from that.
Yeah, it's not that. It's just real. It's clipping and sensitivity, so it's the volume. Why don't we try switching to speaker and see if speakerphone actually works better for once?
Okay.
Yeah, are we on speaker now?
Perfect.
No, hold on just a second.
Oh, nope, not perfect. I was hopeful. I was optimistic.
Okay, I'm on speaker now. Does that work better?
It doesn't clip, so let's just stick with this. Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. So since Jimmy, I know you are an ex-Mormon. I don't know how, from shows I've watched, it seems like you still do interact with your family at least a little bit.
Depends on depends on who. Yeah, I have 13 siblings, and I'd say I talk to about 2 of them regularly, and I'm cordial enough with 2 more.
Okay, so I was raised
siblings.
Mormon, but I, for all intents and purposes, left the church when I was 18 and moved out of the house. But I live about a half hour away from my mother and my father, and every Sunday I get a phone call from my mom, even though I've repeatedly told her I don't believe her stories, I don't believe in the church, and I've actually flat out called it. I don't want to talk about your stories. So she knows my viewpoints. But I can't get her to stop asking me to come to church every Sunday. And I need to know how to get her to respect my boundaries.
I've done this one, Bonnie. I know how to do it. Wait, sorry, without what?
Without totally cutting her out, because I do love my mom, and for the most part, she's a good person.
Are you able to be at least stern?
Sometimes.
Okay, here's my recommendation, and this has worked for me with a friend. Family's tough. You basically say, hey, Mom, you did it again. So here's my new rule because you aren't respecting the boundary that I've told you before. Every time you break this boundary, I'm ignoring the next call you make to me. If you call me on a Sunday and you break that boundary, I'm not talking to you the following Sunday. And then we'll talk the Sunday after that. And if you respect the boundary, we'll talk the Sunday after that. But the fact is you aren't respecting the boundary. You're just blowing by it because you don't expect me to do anything about it. You basically think it's a boundary without consequence for breaking. So for myself, I got to put this boundary up. So if you stay in the boundaries, we talk again. I'll schedule it with you. If at the end of the call, you're like, great call, we did it, we didn't break any boundaries, I'll schedule the next call with you. Otherwise, I'm skipping the next call with you. And that one's pretty good. They're usually like really douchey about it at first. And then you're also going to notice that they like try to push against it again and be like, and so you will have to say, like, just so you know, it feels like you're pushing against it. So before I say like, oh, you already did it, why don't we get off this real quick? Because your mom is, I'm sure, when you were younger, insisted you follow the rules and boundaries of her space, of her safety. You are an adult now. You both have to follow the rules and boundaries of each other's space. And yeah, do it. Do that. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And Jimmy, side note, happy birthday. I know it's a few days late, but happy birthday.
Thank you. Bryce, real quick, do you have an alternative exercise Bonnie might be interested in?
I can only come at it from my perspective, which is extremely unique because it is mine. Right. So when somebody is wanting me to do something that I don't want to do, I think it's important. This is probably not very helpful because I think a lot of people are conflict averse, but I think it is helpful to get them into a situation where they need to tell me why they want me to do this thing. So in this case of, your mom continuing to ask you to come to church, exploring to what end? What is the purpose of it? And look, I think that people are much more hesitant to violate a boundary if they understand why the boundary is there in the first place. And if it becomes abundantly clear through the course of this hypothetical conversation that nothing could ever convince you that the church is true, to the same extent that nothing could ever convince her that the church isn't true, then she might understand the why behind why that boundary is being placed. And that is coming from a total layperson and somebody who is fairly conflict averse, but also who likes to tread lightly and carry a big stick when it comes to stuff about Mormonism. So I feel comfortable having conversations with my believing family members and friends about the church and about their experience at church because they know where I'm coming from. They know that my life and my entire public persona is an anti-Mormon, a vocal anti-Mormon. And just by virtue of me positioning myself in that makes them very much not want to have those conversations ever because they're opening the door to me and I'm Satan to them, right?
Yeah.
But in this case,
that's a good one.
To come back to the overall point, if somebody understands why a boundary is in place, that may go a step further towards them actually honoring that boundary.
Yeah. Yeah, that also reminded. Sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
Oh, just with my mom, that would probably be a lot of, okay, what are you hoping to accomplish here? Because oddly enough, my mother is a counselor, is a licensed counselor. She's not practicing anymore, but usually those sorts of thought exercises do go a long way with her. So we can try that.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Well, I wish you luck. I hope it accomplishes what you're wanting it to accomplish, and it doesn't lead to a fight, because family and religion is always a trepidatious situation, and it's never fun for anybody to navigate.
Bryce's example did remind me, though, of something that actually worked on my dad. If you want one more suggestion, it's there's a close relation. I started offering my dad trades, and he stopped because he didn't want to do the trades anymore. He accepted the first one. I told him, so this was back when I was early on. And to tell you the truth, the book is still a good book, even though Richard Dawkins has become a cringy guy. But I basically said, you pick any apologetics book you want, and page for page, I will read the same number of pages that you read of the God delusion. And so with your mom, if she says, if you come to church with me, find out how long church is and come up with a trade. All right, I will come to church with you for 2 hours, if that's what it is, if you will watch a 2-hour YouTube video with me. You come over and we will watch this video. And by the way, you can't say like, I'm not going to watch anymore because they use swear words and that makes me uncomfortable, because I'm going to be very uncomfortable at church. You don't have to do this one. I understand that this is asking you to expose yourself to stuff, but you might find you only have to do it once, like I did, where my dad literally called and he was like, I read the first 3 chapters. And he even said something along the lines of it might be the best written book I've ever read, but I'm not going to keep reading it. And he never did it ever again. And he never tried to do any type of pushing me to do something. Or read something ever again, because he knew he can't match what he's requesting.
Okay.
And I would also add on to that, I think it's very important that if you are confronting a believer with their beliefs, if such a trade does happen, a believer is going to immediately throw up a wall. However, I know this from personal experience and from many, many anecdotes, so hopefully there's some level of truth to it. If a believer in one religion is presented information about a totally different religion that is controversial, then it's so much easier for them to consume that information. The documentary Going Clear, when that came out, had a huge ripple effect through the Mormon and ex-Mormon community, because suddenly a whole lot of Mormons watched this documentary about the cult of Scientology, and they saw subconsciously, saw parallels to the way that the Mormon church works. Yeah. So if such a trade does happen, the very last thing that you would want to show your mom is ex-Mormon debunks the Book of Mormon, right? Because that's immediately going to cause her to become defensive. But
I would do
showing a person like this,
the Sunday show. Do the Sunday. We rarely do Mormonism on the Sunday show. That's the show to do.
Yeah, something that is not Mormon, because that just smooths the blow, right? That's a little bit of something sweet to help the medicine go down.
In my dad's case, the God delusion isn't Mormon related, and he still put the walls up, but it was theism related, and he's a theist. So, but yeah, Bonnie, I say traitor, or be, if she wants to do like speak to the priest, tell her if she'll call us, you'll speak to a priest. If she will do a call in. If she'll come have a conversation with us, you'll do a conversation with a religious person. Anybody who wants to make that trade with your religious family, I'm in.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Please, everybody do this.
I could get her to do it, but I still love it.
Yeah. As soon as the thing is I bet you she's not going to accept the first trade. Honestly, I'll bet you whatever the first trade is. Okay, Mom, you said church, fine, I'll do it. If you do this, I'll bet you she declines whatever you come up with and doesn't broach the topic maybe once or twice more, but pretty much will stop. Like that's what I think is the most likely outcome. Anyway, I think we gave you like 4 different things to try. Take your pick.
Yeah, you gave me lots of ideas, so thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good enough. Thank you, Bonnie.
Good luck.
All right, thank you. Bye.
It is funny. I like that call a lot more because a lot of people call us and ask, how do I change my parents' mind and basically make them an atheist too? And I'm sitting here like, Bryce, have your parents deconverted?
No.
My parents haven't deconverted. Matt Dillahunty, accepted as one of the best atheist debaters there are. His parents haven't deconverted. Aron Ra's parents haven't deconverted. None of us know how to deconvert our parents, but I probably have a better shot at deconverting your parents than I have at deconverting mine. Like none of us,
that's how it works.
None of us know how. Stop asking. No, I'm not saying stop asking, but we're going to keep starting with that, prefacing it with, we might be able to tell you how to enforce boundaries. We might be able to tell you how to have certain conversations because we've had a lot of trial and error. But specifically, how do I get my parents to stop believing in mumbo jumbo? The moment I figure that out, I will announce it worked. That my parents don't believe in Mormonism anymore. Like,
right. And you will then go on to write a book and sell the silver bullet of anti-theism. It will be incredible, and I will happily read the book and be a champion of the cause too. Because
I'd give it away for
all
free
looking
too, though.
for the easy solution.
Yeah. My problem is I've given away so much content I could have sold as a book that there's almost nothing left except for like really fucked up personal childhood stuff. And it's funny that I can't.
Memoir.
I started writing that book and I stopped because I was like, as much as I hate them for what they did, I can't put my family on blast like this. I can't tell people. And like some of the stuff's borderline torture, man. Like there's some fucked up shit in there. I was having a dinner with Matt the other day and just sharing some of the stories with him. And he instantly was like, yeah, so this member of your family should be in prison like now. I was like, yes, very much, very much. But I can't bring myself, I can't bring myself to do it. It was funny because then it was one of those stories that sounds very unbelievable. Because it is sort of wild and insane. And the next day, Matt actually got to hang out with my brother and I literally just said the headline. I was like, oh yeah, I told Matt yesterday about the blank story. And yeah, my brother Jason was like, yep. That was our life. Like, yeah, it's one of those. It's nice when you have somebody. I feel like so much of my stories, so much of my life, sounds like insane bullshit because it is sort of insane bullshit. You shouldn't subject people to shit like that. That it's nice to have someone around to occasionally be like, yeah, it sucked, fucking garbage. Yeah. Anyway, that
was fucked up, man. Yeah.
That's all I have left, and I can't bring myself. I feel like maybe once my parents die, I could. But even then, that almost feels in a way like right now I'm protecting them from what could be the social consequences of people being aware. But also some of the more fucked up shit isn't necessarily what they did, but what other members of my family did with their approval or encouragement, or because they came from that system. Because, for example, you know, one of the mild ones I've mentioned is I had a brother who so internalized his hatred of not being able to be independent, not being able to be an individual, not being able to masturbate, that he literally put knives in my pillows. like in the hopes that I would lay down and stab myself in the head. That's what a little fucking crazy person growing up in my family creates, that amount of rage and anger. And that's one of the mild stories, everybody.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Big Mormon families.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Crazy shit happens.
The third time I was waterboarded.
Just kidding. Got off easy. Yeah, right.
Just kidding. And then I'm not going to tell that story. It's no, it wasn't David. David is not the one who used to put knives in my pillows. David and I, however, did not get along growing up. Our reconciliation certainly came during adulthood. People on the channel know David because David used to work for me and he used to produce shows and stuff. Anyway, we're going to do super chats and then we're going to call it a goddamn day. So let's
Sounds wonderful.
Let me figure that whole thing out. If you send a super chat of $5 or more, we will read it out on air. That is very much what pays the bills around here, helps us pay for both this show and other shows. It's very nice.
And for getting awesome co-hosts, right?
Kind of. It's more of a, we really appreciate having the super chat support on shows like HOSTility because it justifies doing shows like HOSTility. These shows always have slightly smaller viewership than some of the other shows, but it's one of my favorite things is literally like, hey, here's a person I like, enjoy it and stuff, but we have a lot of costs, the call-in system being the biggest one. And it's nice to cover all of those things and make it lucrative to continue doing it. Otherwise in the future, we'd have to figure out something else to run on Tuesdays that keeps the business going. Now that we have like 10 employees, what the fuck are we up to? 10 people working here. It's fucking insane. There's no life to live, everybody. I'm so miserable. It's a lot. I'm
That's
not
an act, y'all. That's not an act.
I'm very happy, but I am exhausted. It is lots of 80-hour weeks. Yeah, it's a lot. Anyway, it should be ready now. Hit the boop, 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 boop. That is the sound that is made when the system comes on. Let me go ahead and hit this and hit this. Should we put music on in the background? We've done it a couple times in the past. Do you prefer? You feel good about? I have to use the music I have licensed for, so usually I just go pull up an epidemic playlist. Do you have a genre you like?
My genres are not suitable for any type of this kind of an audience. I'm a metalhead through and through, so I don't think that'll exactly go well with us like chillaxing and answering some questions.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough chill one. I mean, there probably is a metal playlist, but I think we've usually enjoyed. I usually like something a little harder, like some trap stuff, but just some lo-fi beats in the background would probably be good enough.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
Turn it way down. Oh, I need to change the auto. Hang on, let me fix it. I know people are gonna be like, it's still super loud. I know. Now it should be being brought down. Oh, that's the wrong one. I brought down the wrong one. Okay, hang on. Now it should be brought down. Should be some a little pleasant in the background. That's coming through to you, right?
This is study music. Yeah, this is great.
I like it. All right, anyway, $5 from Jeff Cochran. I know lots of polite, kind LDS members. It's an act, but they never discuss beliefs around me. Is this sort of self-censorship typical or exceptional? Oh, that's interesting.
That's definitely the common denominator is self-censorship.
Yeah, Jeff, if he had called, this would have been a great calling question because I have questions for you, like, where is this happening specifically? If it's mostly happening at work, that has a different explanation for like mostly happening in social circles and mostly happening. I will tell you the polite kindness. If you're just talking about normal, like, hey, these people are polite and kind, that can all be very genuine. If it's the excessive type, that's cult personality. That is Mormon cult, artificial bullshit. My family was one of the most dysfunctional families probably in the goddamn church, but you wouldn't know it if you were a member of the church. In fact, you thought we were one of the families to like look up to. And I was about to say my legal last name, so I'll just say Snow. The Snow name was well respected and earned that respect because we didn't come from a family. Even though now people are going to be like, well, if it was Snow, didn't you come from Lorenzo Snow's family? That's not the real last name. My actual last name is Waterbaker, or something like that. I'm just making up something. Whataburger is my last name. In-N-Out. My last name's actually In-N-Out Burger.
I thought that was your nickname in college, Jimmy In-N-Out.
That's right. You're right. My last name, I come from the Chick-fil-A. My last name is Chick-fil-A. I come from the Chick-fil-A dynasty. They're not even Mormons. They're Baptists. People mistake them for Mormons all the time because they take Sundays off. How's the audio balance there, everybody? Is it too loud, too quiet? Y'all let me know down there. Obviously, it's good music, but you let me know. Nuzzy D says, thanks for y'all's work with Aron Ra. What similarities do you see BW, LDS, between maybe it means? Yeah. And other radical faiths. Is that what I've never seen B/W used for between? That okay? That's what I was asking. And other radical faiths, would extending religious tax exemptions end bad practices?
Ending religious.
Correct.
Ending, no. Right. So answer the second question. Very easy answer. Would ending religious tax exemption end bad practice? Absolutely no. It may slightly curtail them. It may change the terminology that is used. It may slightly adjust some policy changes, but the practices are never going to end. Just so like, black men could get the priesthood in 1978. Still today, now 40 years later, the church is less than 1% black. So, right. It's the prejudice still exists in the culture, and that's going to take many, many, many more decades to try and evolve the populace of the believing Mormons beyond what the culture has been inculcating for their entire lives. And similarities between LDS and other radical faiths with the church. It's kind of hard to point to a specific era when this happened, but it really does. The acceleration of this trend happened essentially during Reagan era of the church trying to ingratiate itself into the radical conservative Christian majority. And that's because the church wants to try and delicately balance the idea of being a peculiar people, but being Christian. And that's why they changed their logo. That's why they're trying to be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whispered under their breath, because they want to be accepted by mainstream Christianity in spite of all the Baptists saying the Mormons are satanic, but they want to be peculiar so that they can remain separate and distinct. So they want to be in the world, but not of the world. That's a very Mormon phrase. So for a political agenda, for day-to-day practices, and the political leanings of the majority of the members, Mormonism is extremely similar to evangelical Christianity, to Southern Baptists, to basically any other conservative religious movement.
I'm in the world, but not of the world is a very Mormon phrase, but it's also the type of caption you expect a 13-year-old on MySpace in 2005 to put as they post a photo with duck lips. I feel.
That's right. MySpace.
I'm in the world, not of the world.
Invoking the before time.
Bryce, would you like to be in my top 8?
I like to think that I was averse to social media before social media was a big thing. I never even made a MySpace profile because I was like, I don't like this. This feels weird.
Whereas I was desperate.
I despise social media now.
Same. Even as I produce content on it. I was so desperate for identity that I threw myself at all of them. I mean, it was to the point that before MySpace existed, MSN Messenger launched a social media page, and it was called MySpace with a space between my and space. And I created that when other people were talking about their MySpace pages, because I had seen the little icon on MSN Messenger. And so I created that, and everybody was like, I looked for yours and I couldn't find it. I was like, I don't know why. I made one. I made a MySpace. Why are you pulling me? I was so confused. MSN Messenger. Those were the days. And then, the convenience of
great times.
The convenience when you would install Trillion and you'd have MySpace, Yahoo Messenger, and AOL all in the same client.
All in one in the suite. Yeah. And the number of times I got a Netscape trial CD, and so many hours of surfing for free on those. I loved it.
By the way, everyone, if you feel like that's the oldest thing you've ever heard, a Netscape trial CD, Bryce is younger than me. I'm the oldest thing you've ever heard. Fucking Netscape. Oh, man. I haven't thought about Netscape in a long time. Wow.
Netscape and WordPerfect.
Where did you hide your sexy bikini photos? Mine was in some of the like core program files for Mozilla Firefox. I hid them in there.
Yeah. I can't. I'd have to go find my old, Pentium 3 stack tower and scavenge from its, 10 gigabyte hard drive where I put those. I honestly cannot remember. I did have a spot for them all, though, for sure.
Mine was like,
and I think I labeled the folder "fun stuff." I was not very subtle.
Oh, mine wasn't. Mine was to hide it, and so mine was labeled in like Mozilla Firefox's like program file, and then it was like resources, and then it was like source code, and then or whatever, like folder after folder after folder, until you finally got down to the bottom, the deepest layer, and then I created a new layer called like folder called base or something like that, and then in base was like, at first it was bikini photos. It would evolve into like LimeWired Girls Gone Wild videos at some point.
I feel like the soundtrack right now is perfect for the subject we're discussing.
Ooh, LimeWire, watching those pornos gave my computer AIDS. It's a virus.
That's, I say go and, find my old Pentium 3 tower, but that thing is probably still radioactive from the shit I got on LimeWire. Oh,
my
man.
God.
That thing's dangerous.
And then what was before uTorrent? It was it just called BitTorrent? What did I
think
use
BitTorrent was it, yeah.
Torrent. There was another one besides LimeWire. Oh, Napster years ago.
Pirate Bay is where you found them all.
Found the torrents, yeah. And then Napster was before LimeWire even. But there's
Look at us
other
reminiscing while there's a super chat sitting on the screen. Us elder millennials.
This is HOSTility. By the way, I had an idea, and people leave comments what you think of this idea. HOSTility is a pun, obviously. Hostility, but we're not actually hostile, we're hosting. But I was thinking it actually might be kind of fun to bring someone we would be hot. Like, should we bring theists on HOSTility and people can like do call-in questions to be addressed by both people, and then it's like, which side sounds more reasonable? HOSTility might evolve into a type of debate show one day. I don't know. Could do. But
I mean, that's you know what? If I am responsible for being invited on as a guest of the show, and then you change the entire format of the show as a result of me being on, I can live with that.
I've been thinking about this.
I'm okay to like put that in my CV. I literally tailored an entire show because of my presence. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Last week I was fighting with somebody on Twitter, and when I challenged them to come on the show, they thought I meant to come on like a co-host. And so then I was just thinking it through. Is there ever a way I would do that? And that was one of the ideas I had. But the funny thing is I feel like that fits the name of the show better, HOSTility. As far as the pun goes, actually having it be a head-to-head type of thing, call-in show would be kind of cool. Anyway, I think it could be maybe several. Anyway, Rihanna Randall, $20 says, would either of you debate a Mormon? There's one who's recently been on Modern Day Debate and tries to skirt questions. I know you two would hold him to love the line. I would take calls from a Mormon, obvious. I'd love that. Bryce, you're probably one of the people that when we launch formal debates on this channel, if you're interested in doing formal debates with certain individuals, there's a couple of like that Twitter page, Thoughtful Mormon or Thoughtful Faith or whatever his fucking name is, keeps challenging and acting like he's going to call in and then never does, and then goes, well, you can, I have an audience of 4 people. Why don't you come on my podcast instead of, we're offering you, even if 1% of our audience it's only 1% of our audience is on your side, that's still like 100 times the size of your audience. Well, I'm not coming to a 4-person podcast. Do the work, build it up like this. If you ever have an audience, I'll go on. But fuck that shit. Anyway, would you like to do formal debates with Mormons?
I mean, I haven't done formal debating since high school, and that's where I have all my debating chops. So as long as people are not expecting a stellar performance, I mean, I would entertain the idea. It would be a case-by-case basis. I would need to consume material from the interlocutor in question and decide if I feel like I could have a productive conversation with them. But if at any point I felt like I couldn't, then I probably wouldn't engage in it. I have debated cult leaders in the past. That's been fun. But I mean, an honest intellectual debate about Mormon issues specifically, or about Mormon history issues specifically, it's appealing to me, but I've never tried it before. So, yeah.
I'll say this too. I don't have very positive feelings about amateur debate, which I feel like as a debater goes, on the one hand, I would have to become a professional debater, I would have to cut my teeth somewhere. But I feel like the level of, for example, the channel mentioned here, the level of any fucking person can come on and do it, I think has ruined the concept of actual like debate in its formal sense and what it could be effective for. So I would actually say I have a lot of contempt for some of that. But again, we're going to launch debates on the line, but we're going to definitely pose them in a sort of way where it's like categorically it's a debate, but we're not going to pretend it's not something different. Like, for example, the show we're doing with Matt is going to be called the End Boss of Atheism. And the whole joke is like, if you get past him, atheism's dead. And so it's almost a tongue-in-cheek debate, but we'll still do it and we'll give you more time and we'll give you your allotted moments and stuff. But boy, like the days of the Hitchens debates and how incredible those were have been completely destroyed by just some fuckface gets to go on. And debate bros have ruined it also. I don't know. I don't have a lot of good feelings on the matter.
I think those old atheist debates, right? I mean, that's where my atheism, that's a fire that forged my atheism. And I think that they hold a great deal of utility because the early, oftentimes firebrand phase of atheism, where those debates are appealing, that's a transitionary phase for most, I would say, for the majority of atheists, more specifically, the majority of people who leave religion for affirmative atheism. And those are the standard bearers of debates because they are so good. And because the people who are doing those have been academics debating for most of their careers, right? That does not mean that because you watched, William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens, that you then are on their level and you can create something that is as informative and entertaining as them. And I would never hold myself to any kind of a standard like that.
No, I could get there. I could get to Hitchens' level, but it's a lot of work. I could.
Sure.
Fuck yeah, I could. Right. Look at me. Are you
sure?
What have I ever half-assed? So the truth is, I think I could be a very talented debater, but I wouldn't just start doing it like that makes me a debater. Do you know what I mean? It's like I said, if I wanted to do it, I'd cut my teeth somewhere. Could I be Hitchens level? No, who can be Hitchens level? Nobody. Exactly. Hitchens is the GOAT. But could I get up to, there are other people who now don't impress me that used to impress me. Like there are people on the atheist side that I'm like, yo, let's get Dawkins on to debate trans issues with me. Let's fucking do it. I can own that motherfucker. And so it sort of depends. But I don't know, man. I feel like there are paths to choose from, and I'm purposefully not choosing the debater path. But I think I could do it if I put the work into it. But I want to be showing up on certain aforementioned channels. Fucking garbage pail. Anyway, Mike B says, Bryce, love what you do, man. Jimmy, go fuck yourself for creating a network, hiring, working with Matt D, creating the preeminent trans call-in show. Go fuck yourself long and hard. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. That is a compliment for the record. I think I explained it on Aron show, so Yeah.
I mean, I just was really hoping these people were genuinely telling you to go fuck yourself, because I was thinking about doing the same.
It's a lot. I would just assume it was a compliment. Thank you. I also think that the Trans Colin show we do is probably the thing I'm most attached to on this channel, and the thing that I hope explodes in success independent of the channel's doing very well, but no one show has exploded into the stratosphere. The Sunday show does the best, but the one that I want to go to the stratosphere is probably the Transatlantic Colin show. It just deserves it. It really does. Anyway, Mark Smith says, "Hey Jimmy, go sublate yourself. JK, love your work, and you are beautiful, smart, and witty." Thanks. I feel like you're trying. I feel like
that's the actually offensive thing.
Right. People know it. So I've been trying to explain this to people. What happens when people compliment me is I start debating them in my head. I'm literally like, I'm not as beautiful as you think I am. I am controlling these angles. I'm giving you head on like this, so you don't find out what happens if I turn to the, I'm hiding a lot from y'all because I'm narrow. And then smart, it used to be very important to me that I thought I was smart, and everybody thinks I'm smart. I am good at a few things. Otherwise, I am stupid is the word. I would say myself generally stupid with almost a savance for a few things, which is internalized ableism. I know I'm autistic and I'm talking about savants, and the phrase used to be idiot savant. I'm good at what I'm good at. I am a stupid human. And then witty, that's true. That's one of the things I'm good at. That one I'll take. That one. There's no arguing with that one. I'm witty as fuck. You wish you were witty as me. Anyway. What a dick. I got cookies. Says, why do Mormons no longer want to be called Mormon? I'll let you take this one. Because I feel like your insight's better than mine. Mine's just like, because they're a bunch of pedantic bitches and they need to generate oppression. Anyway, you go ahead.
So I think that was actually a byproduct that the leadership of the church was, and when I say they, the presidency, the Quorum of Apostles, I don't think that we were expecting it to be so effective, but it definitely was. It just makes feel real the persecution complex they've been selling for 150 years.
Yes.
It was a purely marketing decision. Most of the things that the church does are purely marketing decisions, and that's what this was. There are so many bad headlines. There are so many ugly blog posts, so many offensive and anti-Mormon podcasts that come up when you Google search Mormon. And at a certain, like when it gets to a certain point that there is just so much negative information out there that you can no longer purchase the search engine optimization to overcome that negative press, you just have to rebrand. There's no going back. There's no clawing it back. There's no amount of propaganda that you can buy that will combat the overwhelming power of that negative press. That the rebranding is the only decision, and it was a purely market decision.
At this point, I'm surprised they're not renaming it the Book of Moroni or the Book of the Book of Mormon has been ruined by the musical.
Absolutely,
it is in fact, there are now people, I've met them, who only know the Book of Mormon as a musical and are like, and that the Book of Mormon itself is like a prop in the musical. Like, wait, so when you said you believed the Book of Mormon, you believed the musical, or you believed it? What were you saying? Like, I'm very confused right now, guys. It's a trip, bro. Anyway, I like your answer. That's more insight that honestly a lot of us don't even consider. Did you see? Well, no, I doubt you're on Twitter ever, but I've been going on like people's posts who call out ex-Mormons and ex-Mos, and I say, how dare you? Please use the updated terminology, ex-member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hilarious bit. If you ever see somebody call someone an ex-Mormon as a pejorative, correct them. Ex-member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yes.
Fucking idiots.
I love it. I love it so much. And what's so funny is like viewing it from the outside, like sure, over enough decades they will be successful if they stick to their guns on this, right? Because like this is one of the problems with the fickleness of having a rotating system of prophets. prophets, PH, not FIT, as prophets, is that you get somebody in there like Gordon B. Hinckley, who has a knack for public relations, who forges connections with the NAACP and tries to make the church seem not racist, not white supremacist as it is. And he embraces the term Mormon, and he spends tens of millions of dollars in the I'm a Mormon campaign, and just tries to put a good face on the Mormon missionaries that you see out there, and drove a ton of good press for Mormon. But this whole time, Russell M. Nelson hates the term. He sees it as a pejorative, and then Russell M. Nelson rises to the level of prophet, and he tries to roll back all of the investment that they put into embracing the term Mormon. And if they stick to the rusty version of it in a few decades, sure, maybe people will not have the same association with Mormon and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that they have now, but that's going to be a long and grueling growing process. But I think it's more likely that we're just going to get a smarter prophet in soon, someone smarter than Rusty, and they're going to turn around and about face the church and try and re-embrace the term Mormon. So
no one's smarter than Rusty is what I grew up hearing. That heart surgeon, the prolific heart surgeon, respected across the world as one of the greatest.
Groundbreaking heart surgeon.
This guy invented hearts. Okay.
He invented the scalpel. He traveled back in time to ancient Egypt and invented the scalpel.
I got to work on some president impressions, because like right now I just want to now just like come in as Gordon and be got to push the lip out and do the say it loud, say it proud. I can't do them at all.
Yes, no, that was good. You got the squeak in there. Yeah,
I am a Mormon, and a Mormon just believes. I sound more like Emo Phillips than I sound like Gordon B. Hinckley.
No, I think that's a good Hinckley. Any ex-Mormons watching are like, no, fuck yeah, that was my prophet. That was my prophet growing up.
That was my prophet. I gotta do that. You gotta
brush up on your Oaks impression, because he's next in line.
That man had some DSL, is what I'm gonna say right there, though. They're Singular. Not gonna. The church isn't gonna like that. No, I mean, yeah, the bottom lip was the featured player for sure, but the upper lip wasn't without charm.
We got to have a good support, right? Like if the bottom lip is good and strong, it creates a support for it. It's much easier. It's on the rest of the jaw muscles.
That lip was holding up an entire generation of apologetics by itself.
The Hugh Nibley lip. Yeah.
That's right. Anyway.
Insider baseball. I know this is not a Mormon audience. A lot of insider baseball going on here now.
Sometimes I think about going further back and but I think an impression of Bruce R. McConkie would be lost on everyone now.
Oh, for sure.
No one would know who I'm doing. Even though we know the name, no one's heard his voice in years.
Packer. Boy K. Packer is pretty recognizable.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was the Joker. The guy who loved and would be loved. The smiley grandpa with the ugly face. Thomas Monson. At your service. I love you. It's almost Biden-esque.
I love you.
I love you. In the name.
Really breathy words.
Wow. Double rainbow. All the way. But something that's so close to my Biden impression, because Biden's that same breathy, like, I'm serious, not a joke. Well, the American people want
it has to be a generational thing, right? Like that's people who grew up in the 40s listening to radio broadcasts.
Where was Thomas Monson raised?
Idaho, I think.
Was it? Okay, yeah, he's like from Salt Lake. I was thinking maybe it was a Northeast thing, that not New York Northeast, but like, am I doing the prophet or the president when I go, I rode the train every Sunday? Seriously, not a joke. Yeah, which one? No, you can't tell.
I don't know.
And that's not because the impression's bad. I mean, it is bad, but anyway. Kathleen Montgomerie says, Bryce, you're Joseph Smith. I always get pronounce that word, please.
Entheogen.
I was gonna say entheogen. Anyway, work changed my life. Jimmy, go fuck yourself.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's really awesome to hear. It sounds like a fellow partaker of sacrament.
Hell yeah. Come on down for the live show if you can get away from Canada for a minute, and we'll give you the sacrament. That sounds dirty. It's not. No. It's really not.
Well, and just to let everyone know, when we were talking about the sacrament earlier, and I want to be blessing the sacrament, administering the sacrament in this invocation, this dedication ceremony, I guess it would be. Yeah, that's my personal research. I'm not a historian. I'm a history communicator, but my history research is looking at and adjudicating and judging whether or not there were psychedelics in the early church, and whether or not Joseph Smith was actually drugging the early Mormons with psychedelics. And I have fellow researchers and I have coined the term the Smith entheogen theory, that Joseph and other church leaders were using psychedelics. So,
that's a version of the church.
That's great.
If I had to go through a version of the church, that sounds like the one I would have liked.
Well, shit. I mean, if there's a causal link that's established of Joseph Smith using psychedelics and the visionary era of the church, those practices, those religious practices, existed long before any regulations on any of these Schedule I substances existed. So I'm just saying, Mormons do have claim the same way that a Native American church does to peyote. So.
Oh, earlier we got the question about similarities between other extreme churches. The song "Turn It Off Like a Light Switch" from the Book of Mormon, I feel I have discovered is something a lot of people from more extreme religions can relate to.
Yep.
Turn it off like a light switch.
It's our nifty little Mormon.
That was it, yeah. I was trying to remember the next line in the middle. Anyway, I haven't seen it. I've only heard the soundtrack. People always ask me about it, so I'm just going to clarify that now. Also, I got cookies that asked whether or not who the saints are. So for people who don't know, the Latter-day Saints is the entire membership, which is funny because they've all presumably seen the movie The Incredibles. If everyone's a saint, nobody is.
Nobody's a saint.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the term that the church has been trying to wrestle out of the iron-fisted grasp of the Catholic Church for the entire time that it's existed, and they still haven't been successful.
Ain't gonna happen. Mad says, I'm trans and ex-mo. My roommate is trans but still Mormon. The thought stopping she uses is so painful to me, and it's difficult to constantly deal with her trying to indoctrinate me. Any advice? I'd say this: go back and listen to the call with the friend that we talked about proposing trades and things of that nature. But surely you must know how much pain your friend is in, and do understand that a lot of her trying to convince you is her trying to convince herself. There is no way to be trans in the church and not be internalizing a lot of hatred. And so I would honestly just say, try and be a supportive friend and present a confidence to her that she understands that if she starts to bounce ideas off of you, you're not going to immediately expect her to leave the church, even if she's bouncing critical ideas off of you, to be sympathetic and empathetic and make her feel like she has a safe place to go, that she's not necessarily held accountable to the next day, the words that come out. People like that need a friend like that a lot more than they need a list of reasons why the church isn't true.
Yeah. I'll share my own experience in this, and this was at a family reunion, actually, after I had started working in the content creation space. An extended family member related through marriage, not blood. I had an altercation with an uncle about church stuff, and the day after that altercation happened, this relative through marriage came up and asked, just out of the blue, walked up holding her kid and said, just point blank, where do you learn about church stuff? And I was immediately like, okay, this is my own internal monologue was like, okay, I feel like this is a trap. This is a situation. But then I read her body language, and it was very clear that she was earnestly seeking information. And I very quickly dropped my defensive barrier because I was in a hostile area. This is a family reunion of all Mormons, right? This is a very hostile situation for me to begin with. But I immediately dropped my defensive structure and recognized she waited until I was out alone by myself and that she wouldn't be seen talking to me one-on-one. And that's when she chose to approach me and ask me this question. That means that she has a lot going on in her life, a lot of problems with the church that she doesn't feel comfortable sharing with anybody.
Yeah.
And that she is wrestling with things in her mind. And she sees me as a person who has probably wrestled with some of the same things as her. And therefore she felt safe asking that question, knowing that the implication is that she's confiding in me that she has doubts. She would not have ever asked those questions had I not had the altercation with my uncle before. Just by virtue of being there and being a person who exhibits love and support to a believer, regardless of what they say, regardless of what they think, and just saying, hey, we're never coming to an understanding. Hey, we're never going to agree about the church, but I want to be your friend. I want to be somebody who you can trust. I want to be a shoulder to cry on. And a person like that, back to what you said, Jimmy, like the messages that this person is internalizing are also they're gender charged and they're culture and religious charged, right? There's a conflation of a person who is dealing with persecution because of their gender identity, and a connection that they would feel of feeling persecuted because of their religious identity. And somebody who is a trans believing Mormon is internalizing persecution from a lot of different angles that all feed into a larger persecution that they then use to believe that what they're doing is right, that they believe in the correct thing. And religions rely on that persecution narrative to perpetuate. And so anything that you can do to not feed into that persecution and not feed into her feeling attacked for her identity, for her religious beliefs, the more you're going to feel like a safe person for her. And the more likely she is to confide in you and say, okay, I actually do have a problem, or hey, I had a rough day at church today and I want to talk to somebody about it, or something like that. So
yeah. Well,
lots of ways to navigate this.
Well put. $5 from Mur on the wall. Random fun questions. Is it true there are special undergarments with special symbols on them? Second, how much did Mormons react to the musical Book of Mormon? I mean, the answer to the number one is yes, but they're very underwhelming symbols. It's a couple of weird stitchings. One's like an L and a little V. Yeah, yep. And they represent every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that, and then one of them represents something else. And they look the only time they actually look significant is when somebody cuts them out to throw away the underwear and then burn the symbols or whatever they do with them. Yeah. Eat them, maybe. As far as reaction,
I gotta dispose of them.
Yeah. They took out ads in the playbill for the Book of Mormon musical. I remember that.
Somewhere hiding on that bookshelf, I have one of those playbills from when I went to it in Salt Lake City. Yeah.
Someone sent me one of the original playbills from the Broadway debut or whatever. And they bought ad space.
Well, look, and that's a point I made earlier, that the church can only buy so much advertising to overcome negative press, and that's an instance where they tried to buy their way out of the negative press, but still more people have seen the Book of Mormon musical than have read the Book of Mormon in a long, long time. So, by the way, if anything, it's almost like, I think they tried to project because they're like, you saw the musical, now read the book, it'll change your life, or that's something the ad will say. And they're acting like it doesn't bug them. It didn't get under their skin. It doesn't feel like a real challenge to us. And I think a lot of people's takeaway is like, bro, it should. It's like somebody said, somebody said like your mom's a whore, and you were just like, that's fine. I mean, I know that's a bad example because I legitimately don't care if someone says that about my mom. It's kind of like, you don't know her, like, or when somebody's like, I'm gonna bang your mom, I'm like, my condolences. Like,
I hope you make her happy. She ain't happy now. Like, fucking Christ.
There's a good response.
There you go. I'll call you stepdad. Whip99 says, happy belated birthday, Jimmy. Have an easy one. Next on the agenda, how to deconvert our parents. No stressing, though. Great co-host, BTW. Yeah, I'll tell you as soon as I find out. It'll be a wild time. But actually, one thing I will add to that whole concept, though, is even the family members of mine who did leave may have felt empowered to leave because they didn't have to leave first. I left first.
Yep.
However, I did not deconvert a single one of them. Like, there were conversations along the way. Maybe one of the arguments or debates, one of the little things might have nagged at a couple of them. But the first brother who left, if anything, the debates we had prior, he had such a built-in ability to dismiss and not respect me at that time that those debates might have actually made it like harder to get him out because he'd have to acknowledge I was right with zero intellectual respect for me. In fact, I can even remember some of the early on stuff, some of the early on themes of being like, well, I left for better reasons than you. And since then, there's no competition anymore. But at the beginning, it was like, a little bit like that. There are other siblings that maybe something like maybe was a part of it. But truthfully, it was more of I did get a call or something like, hey, just thought I'd call and tell you I'm out. And a lot of times it would be surprising where it was like, cool. Yep. Didn't see that coming. My sister leaving, I did see coming. But I didn't see necessarily the timing coming. And there was still a level of surprise when she called, and I could tell in her mind that she was expecting, because of the way my family would have primed her for it, she was expecting to call me and I was going to do some big I told you so. And I was like, I'm not going to tell you I told you so. I'm going to tell you I love you. And I'm glad that you're doing this and that your life is beginning now. Like, that's not fucking who I am. Of the people I want to tell I told you so to, it's not going to be the other people who are beaten into submission of this shit. I know why you believe it. It's the same reason I believed it. Like, and fucking, what kind of I told you so? It'd be like, to me, that would be the same level of, you know, when people politely are like, you tell them something bad happened, and you're like, well, if it makes you feel any better, I wrecked my car on the way to work yesterday.
Right.
And I always go like, why would that make me feel better?
Doesn't make me feel better.
And now
we're just both suffering. Great. Cool.
To me, saying I told you so in that situation would have been the equivalent of going, I do feel better. Like, yeah, sure, my dog is sick and I had to pay a huge vet bill, but you don't have a car. That's hilarious. Like, what fucking kind of psychopath do you think I am? Anyway, only a couple more of these super chats and we'll call it a night here. Last chance to get your super chats in of $5 or more if you want them read out and addressed on the show. Johnny Rapine said it's former member of the church. I fucked that all up. Sorry, Johnny. Johnny said, it's former member of the church formerly known as Mormonism. Keep up the great work, Bryce. Go thoroughly sublate yourself, Elder Snow. You know what's funny, Johnny? They would tell you that that's not true. The Mormons would say we were never the Mormons. It was all. Mormons. Some of them would say that it was always a slur, which is fucking crazy. Because I'm like, and anyway, which tabernacle choir was the best one? Which one?
Right.
Remind me of fucking. Yeah. And which business college have you mistaken for the most prestigious one in all the land? Which one was it again? What was the name of that business college? Yeah. They would try to gaslight that right out of you. Katy Montgomerie, 1069. I would pay a lot of money to watch someone reenact Boyd K. Packer's Little Factories talk. Don't start up your little factory.
Oh no. I feel like that's a new like the line goal or something, is have Jimmy just do a faithful reenactment of Boyd K. Packer's talk.
Well, it's gonna have to be parody. I'm not gonna literally spout that nonsense. I'm trying to remember Boyd K. Packer's voice a little bit here. Let me see how far away.
It was like a smushed, squeaky kind of voice.
Let's see here.
Do we get to hear it? Does everybody get to hear Packer?
Yeah, give me just. I'm gonna pause.
Right.
this music here, and then I think everyone will hear it.
This is gonna be triggering for a lot of people.
Speech is okay. Move forward. God, YouTube sucks.
Order of the church. Again from Alma. All things should be restored to their proper order.
That's an older
young.
one. I remember him
That's
when he
young
was close
Packer.
to end of life. Yeah.
Let's do this one because I was gonna say I am getting
do something that's like 2009, 2010.
I think this one's there we go.
All activity in the church is to see a husband and his wife and their children happy at home.
Gravelly.
They're happy at home. I sound like I am one of the sisters of Marge Simpson.
I think you need more phlegm in the throat to get the crackle.
I probably need to spray it back there. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all. The little factories.
Yeah, work on it. Work on it a little bit. We'll get there.
I have two little factories between my legs. Yeah, no. It's not perfect, but it's achievable. Boy, I almost feel bad, though, because you see him like it's one of those speeches where, because he couldn't walk at the end. He's sitting in the ugly chair with the flesh colored. By the way, everybody who ever does stage stuff, don't do the flesh colored mic. It doesn't blend. It looks fucking bizarre. Go full on black or white or something contrasty. It looks insane when you wear a flesh colored press to the face microphone. It looks so bad.
What's wrong with a lav mic? Just lav mics do a great job. I know that they're a little bit harder for stage presence, but just get a good one.
I do not prefer a lav mic. Glue this to my face and make it look like I've got a melanoma.
It did not do him any favors.
There wasn't a lot of favors one could do. Kathleen Moncrief also says, actually, we should all start telling Jimmy to go work at the little factory instead of go fuck yourself. I feel like that one might hurt my feelings.
That's a good one.
That one, I don't know if I could get past it. I know too much. Here we go to the work at the little factory. You gotta add that little
stage of the mind.
Protected by the principles and laws of the gospel. Husband and wife should understand that.
Husband and wife should understand.
Husband and wife.
Join me at my side, just to cast down your father, slay your father, and join me. Do it. Do it. That hurts my throat to do, though. So there's that also.
Awful.
Yeah. But thank you, Kathleen, as always. Skeptics and Scoundrels says, Mormons and JWs have so much in common: love bombing, no part of the world, isolationism, and so many lovely, upstanding families. Yeah, Owen Morgan and I did a 4-part series breaking down by the Bite model, Mormonism. And Owen, I had Owen there largely to be able to talk about the sort of the parallels between them and the Jehovah's Witnesses. I will say, as cults go, I don't know if this will cause any controversy here, the Jehovah's Witnesses are worse, and that's saying a lot. They're pretty bad.
I think it depends on your calculus of worse.
I think your default experience is worse. Obviously, there will be many Mormons who leave who have a worse leaving than even being disfellowshipped as the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah. But I would say it's pretty bad. It's
hard to compare, right? It's very hard to compare. And I also look at it as a population level and the relative sizes of the cults. Sure. The Mormon Church has a lot more people. So if we're trying to compare, they are causing more suffering by virtue of having, membership that's like 6 times the size of Jehovah's Witnesses. So,
but then you could also say Catholicism's worse.
Calculus.
Then you could say Catholicism's worse than Mormonism, and that would be a phrase we would both be like, "Well, hang on, well, 1 second there, buddy." Right. Yeah, it's from the perspective of the individual experience. I would say it's considerably worse to be a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. I'm glad I was born if I had to choose to do one again, I would never choose Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not even a close temptation.
I agree.
Yeah.
I will also do a self-plug, right? So I held this book up earlier. This is the church's history book. They're trying to rewrite their history, and this is it. So my co-host and I, Shannon Grover, on Glassbox Podcast, we are going through this book, and I'm just pointing out what is history, what is propaganda, what's polemic, what's bullshit. And so she is responsible for the main segments of those shows, and we're going through the bite cult control, mind control model in those episodes, coupled with Saints, because this book is pure cult mind control, in my opinion.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Podcast.
Is she going to be back on? Yeah, links in the description. Is she going to be back on Joseph Smith this Sunday? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We're hoping so. Yeah.
Cool. Don't forget, everybody. Bryce is one of the co-hosts of, or guest. I guess we're guest hosts because it's Orange Channel.
Panelists.
Yes. Bryce is there on the panel of the show that is Orange show on his channel that often I forget I'm not hosting as I show up, and I'm in such host mode doing the show before, but also because I can't turn it off like a light switch.
And I also did an 8-part series with Aron, Joseph Smith versus Joseph Smith. Do you remember when we went through that like list of commandments, that one verse, when I was like, I could do like 2 hours of Joseph Smith violating each and every one of these commandments? Yeah, it turned out to be 6 hours of doing that. So yeah, we did that on Aron's channel. That was a lot of fun too.
Very good series. Yeah. Hank says, $5 from Hank says, Jimmy, as an Australian, I approve of your philosophically appropriate use of cunt, and wish you a very happy go fuck yourself. I will say I am careful not to use sexistly charged epithets against the group for whom those epithets exist. So I think you are very rarely, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm capable of mistake. I wouldn't have called a woman a cunt or a bitch who called in. I'm very careful with that. But again, someday I'm going to break and accidentally do. I quite like the universal.
Is that not sexist in and of itself too? Like not calling women, like, look, I call people bitch all the time when they are acting bitchy. And I'm not using bitchy as in the sexualized term of like she is being a bitch right now. But when somebody is acting like a bitch, I will call them a bitch regardless of their gender.
I feel like we could argue it all night long, and at the end of the day, it would be two cis white men discussing whether or not a term that both has sexist and racist charges to it, whether what we find it appropriate or not. So, we need another one of those.
That's why I'd never call somebody cunt, but I know that that's culturally very appropriate in Australia.
Yeah, I love the Australian overuse of cunt. It's not even always bad. It's sort of like it's
a term of endearment in many cases. It's great.
Do you see my wrench over there? Could you pass me that cunt? Like it's fucking not, and they're calling the wrench the cunt, not the person. But pass that cunt over here. This is a bit more New Zealandish, maybe a bit more. This is a bit more off the island. Nuzzy D says, y'all are great. Had to tell you again. Look forward to hearing y'all on Aron Ra's Joseph Smith. Thanks, Bruce. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. And Jimmy here spelt with an I. I think that's the first time.
You. So.
Oh, Bruce. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Bruce and Jimmy. Nuzzy, spelling errors aside, we appreciate the $5 and the sentiment.
Thank you.
Yeah, hell yeah. Kim Wilson, an ex-Jehovah's Witness, by the way, says, sorry if this was asked already, just got here, but how young are you? Went you first? I think there's some...
When you first start going door to door.
Yeah. How young are you when you first start going door to door? JWs start really young. I think I was like 7. Did you do exchanges before your mission? You didn't go on a mission.
No, so I didn't go on a mission. I never did exchanges. I did, very interestingly, what the way that they train the young men to get ready for their missions is they send you around your neighborhood collecting fast offerings. And fast offerings are things in the church that are done in addition to tithing. The way that it's held culturally is that you fast for 2 meals for 24 hours, and then the money that you would have spent on that, you give it to the church, which goes into the welfare fund of the church, the fast offering fund. So people usually will pay it with their tithing, but there are certain people who want the deacons to come around to their house and show up with a little leather envelope, and the person you knock on the door and say, I'm here to collect fast offerings, and then the person goes and writes their check, and they invite you in, and they'll sometimes give you a little food if you've broken your fast, and then they send you on your way. So the first exposure you get as a Mormon going door to door is asking Mormons for money. Mormon boy is asking Mormons for money. And then pretty soon after that, you start doing home teaching, which is like going into people's homes and sharing spiritual messages from the First Presidency, the Ensign, and the Church's periodical. I keep forgetting this is not a Mormon audience, and I keep using jargon. So my apologies. But yeah, so, and then you do exchanges when you get a little bit older, where you'll, occasionally go out with elders, usually, and try out being a missionary, and that prepares you for going on a mission. But that process doesn't begin usually until you're 12 years old.
And how old were you when you found out?
That's fucking crazy. Jehovah's Witnesses.
And how old were you when you found out and then decided that you were still going to use the old way, that it is in fact pronounced Ensign, and that the church pronounces it wrong?
When I started listening to My Book of Mormon, which is a podcast that I started listening to as an early atheist, David Michael was just an atheist reading the Book of Mormon and giving knee-jerk reactions. And he comes from a naval background, and he called it Ensign because the Ensign is in the Book of Mormon. And I'm like, no. And then he came on the next episode and was like, so I got a lot of people saying that it's pronounced Ensign, but I was in the Navy and it's Ensign and you're wrong. So that was the first time I realized it. So I was 20, 21, 22 years old, and I still use Ensign because that's the Mormon term.
Yeah, it's funny how I definitely heard it in the church every now and then. I feel like even once or twice in a general authorities talk, and everybody just goes, wow, they pronounce that weird. Well, I wonder why they pronounce it so strange. I wonder why the right way they're pronouncing it so odd. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just funny. Anyway, yeah, Kim, so basically everything he just said. So one thing that the Jehovah's Witnesses do differently is, so what people associate as the parallel is obviously the missionaries who are now going out at 18. And then I participated in the missionary thing starting at 16. Basically, as soon as I had a driver's license, I would take Mormon missionaries to different families, and I'd pipe in because I usually actually knew more than a lot of them. A lot of the missionaries, as far as like deep doctrine stuff, were learning on their missions. They didn't know most of it. But I grew up the son of a bishop and seminary extraordinaire. Just a fucking Mormon genius, honestly. Anyway, let's all talk about how smart I am again. So that's when like formally what's more comparable was happening. But one, you aren't really encouraged to go on a mission if you are not a man. In fact, a lot of women, I would say, are even discouraged, though you can go. But yeah, a lot of women are, it's more of, but wouldn't it just be better if you started a family right now? To the point that I think a lot of women who do go do to escape the pressure of getting married, that they're actually it's like it's an escape for them. But they're already being treated like freaks because you're 20 years old and you're not married yet. What's wrong with you? And so it's like, fine, I'm just going to go get on a mission. All of you will shut the fuck up. And then Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's kind of funny because it's also not comparable because like some of the stuff, some Jehovah's Witnesses, like for example, I remember this mother and her child, I think it was her child, but basically like a woman probably in her 40s, 50s with like a 7-year-old boy, bow tie, glasses, the whole thing, coming to the door. And all they were coming to the door to do was to invite me to a Kingdom Hall thing. Whereas Mormons are actually trying to get in your home and start indoctrinating you.
Right. And they want to give you the first lesson.
If you give them the opening, they will ask you to get baptized at the end of the first lesson. It happens way more often than I told that story as an anecdote of, I remember it was weird when we gave the lessons to my girlfriend. They asked at the end if she'd get baptized. And then I was just getting email after email of like, oh no, that ain't weird, bro. That's the default in a lot of places. Fucking crazy.
They do that because The algorithm said that was the most effective method.
Awful. Anyway, just a couple more here. We've got a couple more in, and I'm going so long that more are coming in, and Bryce and I do need to live the rest of our lives. So we'll might take these last couple a little faster. Coffee Mom 499 says, I was telling my mom about Bryce last week and all the research work he's done. Turns out she only joined the church because my dad's family was Mormon. Very sad. Very sad that almost always happens in that direction too. It's not a lot of men converting for their wives' religions. It's a lot of wives being shamed into converting for their husbands.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact.
Yeah. I wish that was a unique and unheard of circumstance, but no, it's terrible.
All too common.
Yeah.
Nuzzy D, curse you autocorrect. As a former Jew, Orthodox Judaism is super culty. Thoughts? Keep it up, Bryce and Jimmy. Yes, correct.
Yeah. 100%.
I feel like it's
usually the term orthodox correlates with culty,
right?
Or fundamentalist. Same.
It's a bit in the name, isn't it? It's so funny how we now have, even before we were ex-Mormons, even as Mormons, we had such relationships with words like fundamentalist. The idea that a church would choose to put that in their deal, in their title, is always wild. But then I've gone to battle with fundamentalist Baptists, so here we are, them new independents. Anyway, probably the last one, unless another one comes in right now. Skeptics and Scoundrel says JW's got Mormons beat with a 33% retention rate, though. So haha, I guess.
Wow. Well, that breaks down on age demographics. JWs are losing the younger generation just like Mormons are.
Yeah.
So,
funny enough. The thing is that JWs want to know if you're leaving the church and eject you as quickly as possible. If you actually account for all of the people like myself and Bryce that they are still counting as members, who even knows what the real retention rate is? It's going to be.
Well, there's the best book on this is Benjamin Knoll and Jana Reese published The Next Mormons, and I actually interviewed both of them on Naked Mormonism, I think. It might have been on Glassbox. Anyway, and basically what they did was a collective survey of millennial Mormons, thus the title, The Next Mormons, the next generation of Mormons. And their findings are pretty, well, not surprising, but expected. But they do actually put some numbers to the population statistics, and it is well over 50% of millennials and Gen Zs who are leaving the church.
Yeah,
that is going to merit a response from the church. What the things that we see the church doing right now are in response to them currently bleeding out this younger generation. But I suspect within the next 5 to 10 years, the church is going to be far more aggressive on proselytizing to younger people and creating programs and support networks and community engagement that are interesting to younger people, because it is a church led by a bunch of fuddy-duddy old fucks right now. And the young kids want nothing to do with it, especially when they Google Mormon and a million YouTube videos come up showing how fucking stupid the church and its belief system are.
Which I feel like that argument that you just made and earlier when people were asking about the membership thing is the number one reason. Do not relent in calling them Mormons. Do not participate in their rebranding. It is important to continue their association. It's like when the Klan doesn't want to be called Nazis. Nah, it's important. Keep calling them Nazis.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So like when I'm drafting the show notes for Glassbox Podcast, I will oftentimes use both Mormon and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the description, because I want that association to remain true. Because I said,
yes, that's kind of what I'm saying.
If the church remains committed to abandoning the term Mormon, it's going to take a few decades for the social collective consciousness to move beyond that association. But right now, is like this is like the mirror fracturing moment of everything everywhere all at once. Like whatever path they're going on right now, I want to do all in my power to keep those terms associated. And that's why I still use the term Mormon and why I embrace the term cultural Mormon. I am a cultural Mormon. They can't fucking take that away from me.
It's just the phrase cultural Mormon to me, the only reason I used it for like all of a few months years ago, and then I dropped it because I was like, it doesn't mean anything. What tradition or thing do I do that is exclusive to Mormon? There's no Mormon specific holiday I get up for. There's no.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it definitely applies more to if somebody is wanting to use a label, good, more power to you. Use whatever labels you want for yourself. I use it primarily because it is the language I speak. I mean, you and I have been throwing jargon back and forth because we're Mormons, dude.
Yeah, see, that's what I've been using lately.
I just say language, right?
I just say I am Mormon again because they won't cut me out. Until they cut me out, I am a Mormon, motherfuckers, and I speak for the church.
Well, and also, I am a history communicator, but that requires me being in the community of Mormon historians and Mormon history. So many of my colleagues are believing Mormons. People who I associate with at Mormon conferences are BYU professors, right? This is my community. I embrace this community, and I am a cultural Mormon.
And I've even been saying that once we're done in Austin and we've done as much here as we can, and I decide it's time to expand out and build some stuff up in some satellite locations, I'd say the most likely place I'm going to end up moving to at some point is Utah. It's going to probably be in the Provo area or the Salt Lake area. It just feels inevitable because honestly, while it is the biggest Mormon community, it's also the biggest ex-Mormon community. And ex-Mormon resources need to be distributed there no more than any other place.
It's true.
Yeah. Anyway, the Raven 200 gave us our very elegant last super chat. But. Y'all can find...
spinning us off with a butt. I love it.
Y'all can find links to Bryce's YouTube channel in the description. Go check out the Glass Box podcast. That's where you're posting mostly, right?
Not YouTube. I just post on podcatching apps. So wherever you get podcasts, Naked Mormonism is the serialized history of Mormonism. And then Glassbox is the current events show. But I also, people like Jimmy are kind enough to invite me on to do collaborations. So, the one that a lot of people know with on YouTube is I did the collab with David Fitzgerald on the Myth Vision show. That was a 27 or 28 part series of the history of Mormonism. It's a condensed Naked Mormonism, essentially. That was a really fun but very time-consuming and demanding project. You can just Google my name, Bryce Blankenagel. Not as it's spelled. It is Blankenagel, not Blankenagel. You can find a whole bunch of collabs that I've done. But hey, I think that's. I'm just.
I got it
saying.
right. Just making sure I got the spelling right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bryce. I will see you on
the description.
Oh, did I get it wrong in the description?
I think it was the thumbnail. It's Blankenagel. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
It was this. It was this, I think.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You can always call me out live on show. I'd have fixed it for you. I'm gonna fix it. And then...
It was more fun to call it out at the very end and make you feel like an idiot for having it be a problem the entire 2.5 hours.
The ability for you to make me feel like an idiot when you have a unique name that no one else in the world has is nil. Oh wow! Did I mess up that super peculiar name? Anyway, thank you for joining. I will see you on Sunday, and then everybody else, we will see you back here tomorrow on the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. He has Shannon Q on as his guest. Thursday will be is it Katy and Student Dr. Ben? I don't know. All the events are up for the next few days. So if you want to know what's coming out on the line, you just go to the channel and hit set reminder on the shows you want to see. It's been a great one. Thank you again, Bryce. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Jimmy.
I'm going to go have some goddamn dinner. Here we go. Run the outro. See ya.